The story begins with a loud explosion that nearly blows away a group of adventurers. The blast came from a powerful platinum-ranked monster that was destroying everything around it. The adventurers, even though strong, were no match for such a beast. In front of them stood a huge dragon. Roaring proudly, the humans were powerless against dragons. A knight from a group, wounded and tired, tried to stand up using his sword for support. Out of the fading smoke, a large man wearing glasses and a tuxedo appeared. He carried only a baseball bat. He apologized for showing up, saying he didn't realize people were already there. The knight looked confused and asked who he was, wondering what kind of outfit he was wearing. Seeing the man only had a bat, the knight thought he must be some lost fool. The dragon roared again, ready to burn everyone to ashes. But before it could attack, the man in the tuxedo swung his bat. In an instant, the dragon's body burst with blood. The adventurers stared in shock as the mighty dragon fell to the ground, dead with just one hit. The man casually said it made a nice sound, as if nothing big had happened. The next morning, in an office called Tokyo Adventure Book Company, a thin pair of hands typed quickly on a keyboard. The man was Keita Sato, 41 years old, single, and an ordinary office worker wearing glasses. Someone in the background complained that an event had been canceled at the last minute. Keita looked up and saw his manager angrily shouting into the phone. When Keita had joined the company 18 years ago, fantasy novels and manga were very popular. The industry was booming, and he had felt lucky to have a stable job. Now, things are different. His manager was upset, blaming a group called Very, a team of famous dungeon streamers popular among young people. Keita didn't really understand the appeal. Why would people want to watch others explore dangerous dungeons online? It was the year 2025, and the world had entered what people called the Great Adventure Era, a time when exploring dungeons was part of everyday life. 18 years earlier, strange dungeons had suddenly appeared all over the world. Monsters came with them, forcing humans to fight back. Those who defeated monsters gained powerful items and became known as adventurers, heroes admired by everyone. For the younger generation, dungeons had always existed. They were called dungeon natives, people who treated dungeon exploring as fun and even streamed their adventures for entertainment. Because the real world now felt more exciting than any storybook, people lost interest in fantasy novels. The fantasy publishing world, Keita's job, was slowly fading away. Keita realized that it wasn't surprising their company's book sales were going down. To keep the business alive, the publishing company where he worked had started selling books and merchandise related to popular dungeon live streamers. Keita thought that maybe he was just getting old since he couldn't understand what young people liked anymore. As he typed on his keyboard, he sighed, thinking how boring things had become. His boss asked if he was getting ready to leave. Keita said that work hours were already over. But his manager reminded him about the very good problem, a big issue with one of their dungeon streamer partners, and said they had to apologize to everyone involved. Keita asked if Ukai was in charge of that. His manager confirmed, but said they needed more help, so she wanted Keita to assist too. Just then, a young woman spoke up politely. She said she couldn't ask Keita to help with that. The woman, Madoka Ukai, looked flustered and close to tears. She was Keita's junior at work, in her second year since joining the company. Ukai was in charge of all dungeon, stream-related projects. She insisted it was her job to handle the situation herself and didn't want Keita to get involved in trouble because of her. Keita thought Ukai was much more talented and hardworking than he was. But he also knew that many people had quit the company before because of how stressful it could be. Smiling gently, Keita said he understood. If they worked together, things would be easier. Ukai blushed when he said that. Their manager commented that Keita should have been more cooperative from the start. Since he was older and didn't understand dungeon streamers well, she joked that he could at least help by kneeling down an apology if needed. Ukai quietly whispered that her boss was being too harsh. Keita told Ukai not to worry. She was actually contributing more to the company than he ever did. He smiled and said that if kneeling down could help, it was a small price to pay. Ukai turned red again, flustered by his kindness. When his manager and Ukai weren't looking, Keita secretly held up 2 fingers, like he was counting something, and sighed. He remembered how good things had been 18 years ago. Even his pay was higher back then. That night, Keita walked through the busy city streets after working overtime. As he stopped to rest, he and others nearby noticed a large digital billboard lighting up above the road. A famous dungeon live streamer named Salaryman from ZBK Official appeared on screen, talking about recruiting new streamers for a show called Doom Production, Season 3. But Keita wasn't actually watching the ad. He was looking at the small signboard of a 24-hour noodle shop below the screen. His stomach growled, but when he saw that a simple beef bowl cost 490 yen, he frowned and decided not to buy it. As he walked away, someone behind him suddenly used fire magic on the street. The people with the magic user laughed, warning him that he could get arrested for that. The man just smirked and said it was fine. The crazier they acted, the more views and followers they'd get. He didn't want to end up like some boring old man, he added, clearly mocking Keita. His friends laughed, remembering how Keita had been staring at the beef bowl shop earlier. Keita felt irritated but didn't argue. He simply lifted 2 fingers again, as if silently counting, and walked to the train station. He'd heard that being an adventurer could make someone richer than a regular office worker nowadays. But Keita didn't care. Their lives were theirs, and his was his. Later that night, Keita arrived home. He quietly said sorry for being late. On the sofa, a girl was lying down, playing on her phone. She looked up, smiled, and greeted him warmly. The girl's name was Hikari Amahara, a 16-year-old high school student. She stood up and told Keita that she had made cheese curry for dinner. Keita thanked her, saying he was hungry after working late. Hikari was his niece, his older sister's daughter. Hikari, wearing an apron, smiled and said she would warm up the food for him. After Keita's parents had passed away, he lived alone in their old house. But later, his sister and Hikari came to live with him after his sister separated from her husband. Living with his sister was fine, but living with a teenage girl felt a bit awkward for him. While watching Hikari cook, Keita worried that her shirt was a little too loose on the sides, but he didn't say anything. A few moments later, he began eating her cooking and was surprised at how tasty it was. Hikari smiled happily, teasing her uncle that he enjoyed food so much it made her want to cook for him more often. Keita sighed and admitted that eating was pretty much the only fun part of his boring life. Hikari thought to herself that it sounded kind of sad. Keita told her that her cooking had really improved. She laughed and said it was because she made it with love for him. He ignored her teasing and said the carrots were cut into cute star shapes. Hikari rolled her eyes. She was bored that her uncle never reacted much to anything. Checking her phone, she showed him something. It was a live stream by Very, a group of popular dungeon streamers that her friends liked. She asked if he knew them. Keita thought to himself that he had just worked overtime that day because of Very recent scandal. In the video, the Very members spoke to their fans, saying they didn't regret what they'd done and that it was unfair Japan didn't accept them. They claimed they hadn't caused any trouble, so people shouldn't be mad. Hearing that, Keita grew angry. Hikari frowned too, disgusted at how arrogant the streamers sounded. When she noticed her uncle's dark expression, he quietly held up 3 fingers, like he was keeping count of something, then stood up. He thanked her for dinner and said he was going out for a bit. Hikari asked where he was going so late, and Keita replied that he just wanted some exercise. He put on his jacket and told her to get some rest since it was late. She watched him leave, wishing him a good walk, but then, after a moment, she smirked. Later that night, on the busy city streets, Hikari secretly followed her uncle, recording him on her phone. She thought he was acting strange, always going out at odd hours, and sometimes coming home covered in blood, which had shocked her before. She remembered one time, while washing his clothes, she found a rare, glowing item in his pocket. When she had it appraised, the shopkeeper told her it was something that only dropped from SSS rank monsters, creatures that existed in the deepest parts of dungeons. Since then, Hikari was convinced that her quiet, ordinary uncle was hiding something big. He might act uninterested in dungeon streamers, but she was sure he had a secret life connected to them. Hikari decided that today was the day she would finally catch her uncle's secret. She followed him through the city until she reached a big building. Outside, a group of people were protesting, shouting about taking back Shinjuku and freeing the dungeons. When she looked up, Hikari realized where she was, a batting cage. She frowned, wondering why her uncle would come here so late at night. Hiding behind a pole, she watched him pay for an hour at the counter and smirked. It was then revealed that Hikari was actually a registered adventurer under the name Hikari Nindo, and her main skill was stealth, ranked SSS, one of the best. Quietly, she followed her uncle without him noticing. Everything looked normal at first, until she saw Keita open a door. When he stepped inside and closed it, he suddenly disappeared. Hikari froze, shocked. The door shimmered, and glowing words appeared on it. Recommended level, 140 dungeon. Her eyes widened in disbelief. That kind of dungeon was only for top-tier adventurers. Yet her uncle had just walked in like it was nothing. She couldn't believe that a normal office worker like him would even survive in such a place. Worried but determined, she decided to follow. With her stealth ability, no monster would notice her anyway, or so she thought. She was still nervous, wondering if her uncle would really be okay in a dangerous dungeon like this. Then, from the dark shadows, a giant frog monster appeared. Its body sparkled like a diamond. It was a diamond frog, a creature known to hide on walls and ceilings. Its skin was so tough that almost no weapon could pierce it. Hikari froze in fear. Even gold-ranked adventurers struggled to fight them. She gasped. This is bad, she thought. Uncle Keita could be killed in an instant. The diamond frog leapt toward Keita, but he didn't even seem scared. His glasses glinted as he grew serious. Calmly, he reached behind him, grabbed his baseball bat, and swung it with full force. Crack! The frog flew across the dungeon, smashing into the wall and vanishing in an explosion of light. Hikari's mouth dropped open. He had defeated a diamond frog in one single hit. She remembered that even the famous dungeon streamer CEO Owari, with his 300 million yen magic sword, needed 2 hits to take one down. But her uncle, a man in a suit with a bat, did it instantly. Before she could recover, more diamond frogs appeared, dozens of them crawling from the walls. Hikari remembered that diamond frogs was plural because they always attacked in groups. Keita adjusted his stance and charged at them. Each time he swung his bat, he shouted something under his breath. One hit for his annoying boss, another for rude young co-workers, another for those selfish live streamers who caused trouble for everyone else. Hikari couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her quiet, tired uncle from the office was fighting like a storm, smashing through every monster with ease. Each strike echoed through the dungeon. BAM! Crash! Boom! Finally, when the last frog fell, Keita stood there catching his breath, a calm smile on his face. For the first time, Hikari saw him truly alive, strong, confident, and strangely happy. She stood frozen in awe and thought, "What on earth is my uncle?" Hikari couldn't believe what she just saw. Her quiet, ordinary uncle had defeated powerful monsters like it was nothing. She wondered if he had been secretly coming here all this time just to relieve his stress by fighting monsters. Feeling a little sorry for him, she thought maybe she could help by showing the world how amazing he really was. An idea popped in her head. What if she live-streamed it? Excited, Hikari pulled out her phone and started streaming. Almost right away, comments started appearing. Someone congratulated her on her first live stream. She smiled proudly. People were already watching. More comments appeared. Some viewers asked where this dungeon was, saying it didn't look like one of the upper levels. Others guessed it must be from the deeper layers, since Keita was fighting diamond frogs, which only appeared in high-level dungeons. A few fans even compared it to Sueren's stream, saying that Sueren, a famous streamer, barely managed to beat one diamond frog, and now this man in a suit had defeated several with a baseball bat. Viewers were confused and amazed. Some asked why he was wearing a suit, where his party members were, and what kind of weapon he was using. The chat exploded with excitement, and people begged Hikari to show his face. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the dungeon. From the smoke, an enormous glowing serpent appeared, the Diamond Boa, an SS-ranked boss monster. The comments went wild. People panicked, typing that the man was in serious danger. Hikari gasped in fear. She knew the Diamond Boa was one of the strongest bosses ever discovered. Even top adventurers struggled to fight it. She screamed for her uncle, but he didn't hear her. Keita stayed calm, gripping his bat. The monster lunged, its scales shining like glass. Keita swung with full force, the clang of metal echoing through the dungeon as walls shook from the impact. The livestream viewers thought it was over. They assumed Keita had been crushed. For a moment, the screen went blurry. Then suddenly, the image cleared. Hikari's eyes widened in shock. Her uncle was still standing. He looked stronger, his body bulkier than before, still in his torn suit, gripping his bat tightly. The viewers went crazy. No one could understand what was happening. Keita steadied his stance and faced the boa head-on. As the serpent hissed and charged, Keita closed his eyes for a brief second. Memories from his past flashed before him. The times when he was a kid, bullied by classmates who made him clean up after them. His so-called friends would laugh, saying he liked helping people anyway. Then he remembered his manager calling him an old-timer, the rude guy on the street calling him a corporate loser, and the arrogant very good streamers saying they didn't regret anything while he worked late to clean up their mess. All those years of pressure, disrespect, and frustration boiled inside him. His grip on the bat tightened. Enough, he thought. With a furious shout, Keita swung his bat with everything he had. The blow hit the diamond boa straight on, creating a shockwave. The serpent roared, blood spraying everywhere as it was cut clean in two. The livestream chat exploded in disbelief. Thousands of viewers typed at once. There's no way. He killed an SSS boss with a metal bat. Is this guy even human? Some called him a new rising star, while others joked that the mysterious fighter looked like an old man in office clothes. The screen filled with a mix of cheering, amazement, and jokes about his satisfying bat sound. Hikari's hands trembled as she held her phone. The stream was going viral. Tens of thousands were watching live. She stared at her uncle, standing proudly as the diamond boa's blood rained down around him. In her eyes, her uncle wasn't just a tired office worker anymore. He was the coolest man in the world. As Keita let out a long sigh, finally looking relaxed, Hikari grinned. Her heart raced with excitement, and one thought flashed in her mind. This smells like money. 18 years ago, dungeons suddenly appeared all over the world, an event later called the Dungeon Disaster. It was an unprecedented phenomenon that threw Japanese society into chaos. The internet and mass media were overwhelmed with speculation and fear as the world realized it was on the brink of drastic change. Yet even at that moment, Japan's corporate workers continued their routines, buried in paperwork and deadlines. Keita Sato was 23 years old then. On the first day of the disaster, his company allowed employees to leave early. The trains had stopped, and the city's atmosphere was filled with unease and a sense that something extraordinary was unfolding. But by the next day, the trains resumed operation, and the workers were ordered back to their offices as if nothing had happened. Japan was desperate to restore normalcy, even in the face of the unknown. Keita found himself drained of motivation. Having a hobby required both time and energy, two things he realized he no longer had since becoming an adult. The only place left where he could feel a hint of release was at the Shinjuku batting cage. That day, Keita had made up his mind to earn the 160 kilometers per hour batting challenge certificate, a small personal victory he'd been chasing. It might have seemed foolish to others that a worn-out salaryman would spend his evening swinging at baseballs after work, but for Keita, that brief time was his only outlet for stress. He was determined to face the fastest pitch the Kanto region had to offer, 160 kilometers per hour. As he gripped the metal bat tightly and focused on the next pitch, the ball came flying toward him at blinding speed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the batting cage, the storekeeper's expression turned to horror. Something other than a baseball ricocheted violently through the air. A man was struck and impaled by it. The object fell to the ground, twitching, and from the man's lifeless body, something small and grotesque wriggled out, a monster. Panic erupted instantly. People screamed and ran in every direction, trampling over one another in terror. Unaware of what was happening around him, Keita continued his challenge, irritated by the sudden noise. He was just beginning to get into rhythm when a small creature burst through the wall. Reacting instinctively, Keita swung his metal bat with perfect timing. The impact was clean and powerful. He thought he had hit a baseball, but it wasn't. The thing he struck was the same monster that had caused the chaos moments earlier, a metal slug. In the New World, these creatures were rare beings that granted large amounts of experience points to those who defeated them. Without realizing it, Keita had just achieved something incredible. His swing sent the monster flying, decapitating it in an instant. Overjoyed by what he believed was a perfect home run, Keita cheered loudly, completely oblivious to what he had actually done. He rushed to the manager, eager to claim his home run certificate. But when he reached the counter, his excitement froze. The floor was covered in bodies. The store was soaked in blood. The certificate lay on the counter beside the corpse of the manager. Keita's mind went blank. Then his alarm went off. Keita opened his eyes in his room, drenched in sweat. For a moment, he thought it had been a dream, but the memory of that bizarre event lingered vividly. The ball he hit had been a monster. It sounded insane, but it was the truth. Still, one lucky miracle hadn't changed his life. He remained an ordinary office worker. Exploring dungeons had become nothing more than a weekend hobby. After fixing his tie and taking a deep breath, he stepped out of his room. In the dining area, a woman waited, smiling gently as she invited him to have coffee with her. Keita agreed politely. She raised an eyebrow, remarking that he was acting distant and overly formal. She asked if he was bothered by her sudden return home. The woman was Akari Amahara, formerly Akari Sato, Keita's older sister by 2 years, and the mother of a girl named Akari. Keita sat down, explaining that since Akari was around, he needed to act like a proper adult and not speak too casually. Akari smiled, saying that was quite mature of him, before casually asking where he had been the previous night. At her question, Keita stiffened and gasped quietly, his body tensing as his mind raced for an answer. Akari remembered coming home to an empty house. Keita grew tense, realizing he couldn't possibly tell her the truth, that he had been sneaking into dungeons every night, fighting monsters to vent his stress from work. Akari grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him, her emotions spilling out as she expressed how lonely she had felt. She demanded that he at least greet her properly when she came home. Confused, Keita looked around, realizing no one else was there. He asked where Hikari was, recalling that he had told his niece to go to bed earlier. With tears in her eyes, Akari told him that Akari had said she was live streaming from a dungeon. Late into the night, Keita confronted his sister about it. The idea of a teenager venturing into a dungeon alone disturbed him deeply. He warned Akari that it was dangerous and that she needed to stop her daughter before something terrible happened. Teenagers were stubborn, he thought, but this was beyond reckless. Akari agreed, but her tone carried resignation. She pointed out that, in the modern world, being a live streamer was one of the most profitable careers available. Keita pulled out his phone and searched for Hikari's channel. Sure enough, it existed 1,503 subscribers and 5 uploaded videos. He frowned, unsure if that number was considered high or not. Akari glanced over and remarked that it wasn't much to brag about. She reminded him that he worked in the same field and should know about these things. Keita gave a distracted nod. Then, Akari's tone turned serious. She confessed that she didn't want to be the kind of parent who crushed her child's dreams just because she was afraid. But at the same time, she looked at her brother and said that if that was the case, he should be the one to stop Hikari. Keita sighed, frustrated, and told her not to force him into playing the villain. He began getting ready for work. Akari asked if he'd had breakfast yet, offering to make something quick for him. He declined, saying he would grab something from a convenience store on his way. He told her he'd be back later, then left the house. A short while later, at the train station, he walked past a group of people talking about the Shinjuku batter. Two high school students were animatedly discussing the mysterious figure, saying he fought in dungeons armed only with a metal bat. One of them wondered if the Shinjuku batter was a live streamer, and the other confirmed it. Hearing that, Keita exhaled heavily, irritation flickering across his face. It was yet another reminder of his draining job at Very, where he constantly had to deal with online content messes and live streamer scandals. Just thinking about it made his stomach twist. All around him, the chatter continued. Everyone seemed obsessed with dungeon streamers and their exploits. Keita thought bitterly that since dungeon live streaming was tied to his line of work, he should probably learn more about it. He wondered idly what kind of person the Shinjuku batter really was. As he let out another weary sigh, he noticed the businessman standing behind him, slumped, lifeless, and exhausted, much like himself. At Keita's workplace, Ukai greeted him in a disheveled state, her face pale and trembling from exhaustion. Her hair was messy, and dark circles marked her eyes. Keita immediately noticed her condition and asked if she had stayed up all night. Ukai confirmed it, explaining that Very apology video had gone viral once again. Their sponsors were enraged, and she had spent the entire night drafting and sending apology emails in an attempt to calm them down. Keita covered his mouth in disbelief at her pitiful state. He opened his eco bag, took something out, and handed it to her while advising that she should rest. It was a rice ball. Ukai gratefully accepted it, thanking him weakly. Keita told her to eat first, then take a nap and a shower. She was drenched in sweat. Ukai nodded, remembering that the office air conditioner automatically shut off at night, making it even harder to stay awake. After a brief pause, Ukai asked what they were supposed to do about Verigude's situation. The streamers under major agencies like Doom refused to even acknowledge them anymore. The company's reputation had sunk so low that even reaching out to them was pointless. She wondered aloud if there were any rising live streamers who might still accept their small budget. Trying to lighten the mood, Keita mentioned that his niece had recently started live streaming. Ukai perked up and asked how many subscribers she had. When Keita replied that it was about 1,500, Ukai immediately apologized, shaking her head. That number wasn't nearly enough for their purposes. She sighed deeply and muttered that she hoped the Shinjuku batter would respond to their offer instead. Keita turned to her curiously and asked if that person was famous. Ukai's tired eyes suddenly lit up with excitement. She explained that the Shinjuku batter was the most talked-about figure from the night before, a sensational newcomer who had gained over 10,000 subscribers from his very first live stream. Keita was genuinely surprised. Ukai continued, her enthusiasm growing as she spoke. It was extraordinary, she said, especially since the Shinjuku batter was a solo streamer. On his debut stream, he had gone deep into the lower layers of the dungeon completely alone and defeated an SSS-ranked Diamond Boa. She declared that this could be the birth of a legend in the streaming world. Keita froze for a moment, stunned. The monster she described, it was the same one he had fought the previous night. He hesitated, then asked if that Diamond Boa was really that powerful. Ukai nodded gravely, explaining that Verigude had once attempted to defeat it and had been completely annihilated. The Diamond Boa possessed an ability called Diamond Power, granting it a 90% reduction in physical damage. It was one of the strongest dungeon bosses, so tough that even a top-ranked party of 20 players struggled to bring it down in a coordinated raid. Keita recalled the encounter in his mind. The Diamond Boa's scales were indeed hard, but its internal structure was fragile. If one could transmit impact precisely through the sweet spot of a bat, damage could penetrate its defenses. The thought made him uneasy. Could it really be a coincidence that the Shinjuku batter had defeated that same monster just last night? He shook the idea off. There was no way it could be connected. He never live-streamed what he did in dungeons. For him, entering dungeons was nothing more than a personal hobby, a way to vent his daily frustrations. It must have just been chance. A few hours later, Keita and Ukai stood in front of their manager. The manager reminded them that Verigude had originally gained popularity through controversial videos that bordered on scandal, content designed to flirt with virality. Despite their troublesome behavior, those streamers had once been valuable assets because they brought attention and engagement. Now, however, the manager's tone was cold and irritated. She ordered Ukai to cut those brats loose immediately. They were no longer worth the trouble. Then she turned to both of them and commanded that they quickly find a replacement dungeon live streamer. Until then, she warned, they should expect to work overtime. Hearing that, Keita and Ukai's expressions went blank. The life seemed to drain from their faces as they realized that their exhausting routine was far from over. At school, Hikari sat at her desk, eyes glued to her phone screen, grinning with excitement. The channel she had secretly created under her uncle's name had just reached 17,000 subscribers. Her heart swelled with pride as she marveled at her uncle's awesomeness, believing that thanks to him, her follower count kept growing. She couldn't stop praising him in delight, declaring inwardly how much she adored her old man. Beside her, her friend Mia looked unimpressed. In a flat tone, she asked if Hikari had a sugar daddy, clearly skeptical of her enthusiasm. She reminded Hikari that live streaming someone without their consent was dangerous and illegal, warning that she'd get caught eventually and dragged into serious trouble. Mia also pointed out that Hikari's uncle wasn't the type who liked attention. Hikari brushed it off with a confident smile. She knew her uncle well. He always felt secondhand embarrassment whenever he saw anything related to modern youth culture, and he never watched live streams. There was no chance he would find out about her secret project. Mia frowned, commenting that Keita seemed allergic to youth culture. It sounded rough. Mia then revealed something she had discovered during her research. The batting cage, where Keita often had once been struck during the dungeon disaster 18 years ago. Hikari asked in surprise if she meant that dungeon disaster, and Mia nodded. She explained that many people had died there, and even after the site reopened, the dungeon gate had remained. Hikari found it unsurprising, remarking that there were many such gates scattered around Shinjuku. Mia confirmed this, adding that while a few of those gates were officially managed by the Japan Adventurers Guild, most adventurers used them freely. Hikari replied that it made sense. After all, those gates were conveniently located. Mia leaned closer and said that Hikari's uncle used one of the more dangerous gates, the kind that opened directly to the deeper layers of the dungeon. Even elite adventuring parties could die if they entered recklessly. Hikari's eyes sparkled with admiration, thrilled by how fearless her uncle was. She proudly declared that her uncle was truly incredible. Mia, however, reminded her that Keita had been a kind and dependable guardian who had helped her through difficult times. She questioned whether it was right to expose someone like that without his permission. Seeing Hikari's guilty expression, Mia softened her tone, admitting she understood how tempting it must be, especially since the million-view video they had gained was too good to throw away. Hikari nodded, agreeing half-heartedly, then promised that she would tell her uncle the truth. Mia sighed in relief, saying that was for the best. But Hikari added playfully that she would confess after she became a billionaire. Mia froze, speechless at her friend's audacity. Later, in the hallway, Hikari told Mia about her next plan. For now, she would set up facial and personal information filters for her uncle. That way, when she live-streamed him again, his face and voice would be completely unrecognizable once uploaded. Mia realized Hikari was preparing to stream her uncle spontaneously in the future without his awareness. Hikari praised Mia for her technical skill, saying she was as reliable as always when it came to internet tricks. Just then, Hikari's phone rang. The screen showed her uncle's name, Keita Sato. She quickly answered. Keita told her he would be working overtime again that day and wanted to let her know. Hikari repeated the word overtime in disbelief, then asked what he would do about dinner. Keita hesitated, nearly slipping up, before correcting himself and saying that he would go out for a drink that night. Hikari immediately understood what he actually meant. He was heading into a dungeon again. Trying not to sound suspicious, she asked whether his phone's GPS feature was turned on. Keita said he didn't really use that function. Hikari sweetly told him it would be helpful if he turned it on so she'd know when he was coming home, since she got lonely without him. Moved by her words, Keita agreed to activate it. As soon as the call ended, Hikari grinned widely and declared her mission accomplished. Mia gave her a sharp look, commenting that she had some serious nerve. Now, Hikari knew exactly where her uncle would be that night. She immediately posted an announcement on the secret channel she had made for him. The Shinjuku Batter will be live streaming tonight. Hikari leaned back in excitement, wondering what incredible things her uncle would show during his next broadcast. Meanwhile, deep inside the Shinjuku dungeon, a group of adventurers gathered near the gate leading to the lower layers. They were agitated, discussing what to do next. Their latest operation had fallen apart, and all their efforts had gone to waste. A man named Mash cursed under his breath, saying they were doomed. Beside him stood another man called Vinegar, equally frustrated. A third man, scrolling through his phone, complained that things were only getting worse, especially with a new, annoying streamer stealing all the spotlight. Another member, Salt, shouted that they had already apologized and that gathering weak monsters to level up wasn't a crime. It was simply more efficient. Mash countered that internet users were claiming if too many monsters were gathered, they would enter a berserk state. Salt dismissed the idea, insisting it was false. They had done it countless times without issue. Leaning casually against a cracked dungeon wall was a man named Potato, the quiet leader of the group. He asked if that day wasn't the day Swearin was doing a live stream. Salt's eyes lit up at the mention of her name. He gushed about how amazing and cute Swearin was, then suggested they could surprise her with a sudden appearance and collaborate. It would go viral instantly. Potato, however, shook his head. That wasn't enough. A simple collaboration wouldn't erase their bad reputation. They needed something dramatic, something that could completely overshadow their recent controversy. He suggested that if they happened to rescue a live streamer in serious danger during a live broadcast, that would create a powerful comeback moment, something people would never forget. The group nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. These men were the infamous adventuring and streaming team known as Vergood, a channel with 420,000 subscribers. Late that night in Tokyo, Kato was counting softly to himself when Ukai noticed and asked if something was wrong. He admitted that the situation was far more frustrating than he had imagined. He reflected bitterly that if they wanted to make people work, it was only natural to compensate them properly. He knew that those who could deliver real results deserved fair treatment, yet their manager expected them to find top performers at the lowest possible cost. The idea of being forced to work unpaid overtime just to meet such unrealistic demands made Kata's irritation grow with every passing minute. Ukai, feeling guilty, apologized for making him take on her workload. Kata reassured her that she didn't need to apologize, but Ukai still wanted to show her gratitude somehow. When she spotted a ramen shop nearby, she insisted on treating him to dinner as a small token of thanks. Kata quickly refused, saying he couldn't accept a meal from his junior colleague. Adjusting his glasses, he added that it wouldn't be appropriate for a male and female co-worker to eat together from a compliance perspective. Ukai silently thought that since both of them were single, there was no reason to worry about such things. But Kata continued, warning that carelessness could be dangerous, especially when one was dealing with someone as attractive as her. His words completely caught Ukai off guard, leaving her blushing and speechless. Kata bowed politely, wishing her a good night, then quickly took his leave. As he walked away, Kata felt a chill of relief. That was close. If anyone spread rumors about him, making unwanted advances, it could cause serious trouble at work. He was thankful that he managed to distance himself before anything could be misunderstood. A short while later, Kata arrived at the batting cage. He paid the 500 yen entrance fee, and the storekeeper cheerfully told him to enjoy himself. Unaware of what was happening behind him, Kata walked deeper inside toward the dungeon area. Trailing quietly behind him was his niece, Hikari, her eyes glinting with excitement. She had been waiting for this moment and was eager to capture some amazing footage tonight. She summoned her familiar, a small spirit drone shaped like a cat, and activated her skill, Stealth SSS, which granted her perfect invisibility. Despite her poor combat ability, this skill allowed her to sneak into dangerous areas undetected. With her invisible drone ready, she could record her uncle's secret activities without him ever realizing it. Suddenly, Kata stopped walking. He turned sharply toward Ikari's invisible familiar, his instincts sensing something unusual. A shiver ran down Hikari's spine. He had incredible perception. Before she could react, Kata swung his metal bat toward her direction. The bat crashed into the ground right beside her, narrowly missing. Hikari froze, her heart pounding in panic, terrified that she was about to be discovered. Kata sensed that something was moving nearby and turned toward the source of the presence. He pointed his metal bat forward and, by accident, pressed it against Hikari's chest. Confused by the strange, soft resistance, he wondered what this squishy wall could be. The sensation didn't make sense to him. It wasn't the texture of any wall or monster he knew. He thought it might be some kind of creature, possibly a slime, but even that didn't seem quite right. Hikari, still invisible, froze in place. Her face turned bright red as she struggled to stay silent, afraid that the slightest sound would give her away. Just as tension filled the air, a loud siren suddenly echoed from deep within the dungeon lair. Kata immediately released his grip and turned his attention toward the direction of the alarm. Without hesitation, he ran off to investigate, leaving the trembling Hikari behind. Meanwhile, in the Shinjuku dungeon at the border of the level 140 zone, the adventurer Swearin and her party encountered an unexpected danger. What they had thought was a treasure chest turned out to be a trap. Panic spread among her teammates as diamond frogs began gathering from every direction. Even a single diamond frog was considered troublesome to handle, but now there were many. One of the girls in the team screamed in fear, asking how many there were and crying that they were doomed. Swearin tried to rally her panicking team, shouting that they would fight to survive. The comment section of her live stream exploded with reactions, some supportive, others inappropriate. Irritated, Swearin scolded the commenters, reminding them that she could see their messages, and declared defiantly that they were not going to die. Her frustration was cut short when one of her teammates, entangled by a frog's sticky tongue, cried out for help. The girl's body was being pulled toward the creature, and Swearin quickly realized that if this continued, her entire team would be wiped out. She gritted her teeth and swung her sword, casting her water-based magic spell, Megatron Pump. A surge of violent water pressure blasted toward the diamond frogs, but to her horror, it had no effect. The monster's diamond-like skin deflected the attack completely. Before Swearin could react, one of the frogs lashed out its tongue and wrapped around her tightly, pinning her arms and squeezing her body with brutal force. The strength of its grip made it hard for her to breathe. Just as her vision began to blur, a sudden gust of wind brushed past her. In an instant, a man appeared behind her, Keita, his body glowing faintly with buffed energy. He swung his metal bat with overwhelming power. The next moment, the diamond frog that had captured her exploded into fragments, scattering across the dungeon floor. Swearin fell to her knees, gasping for air as she realized she had been saved. Her livestream chat went berserk. The viewers flooded the screen with astonished comments as the mysterious man came into view. However, his face was completely blurred by the system's automatic privacy filter, an AI protocol that distorts the features and voices of those who haven't given consent to appear on stream. A man in a suit, wielding a metal bat. Viewers began shouting in disbelief. Was this the rumored Shinjuku batter? Swearin stared up at her unexpected savior, utterly stunned, her heart still pounding from the chaos and from the presence of the enigmatic man who had appeared out of nowhere. Keita stood in front of Swearin and her teammates, his stance firm and composed as he faced the remaining diamond frogs. The air was heavy with tension, but above them, unseen, Hikari's familiar, a feline-shaped spirit drone, hovered silently, recording everything. The live stream had exploded in popularity, the viewer count climbing rapidly until it reached 32,055. Hidden behind the dungeon wall, Hikari stifled her laughter, barely containing her excitement as she watched the numbers soar. She was ecstatic, giddy over how many people were tuning in. Her uncle was incredible. Her views, subscribers, and donations were skyrocketing again. To her, Keita was the perfect star. The chat was in chaos. Fans were frantically commenting, asking if this was a surprise collaboration between Swearin and the mysterious Shinjuku batter. Some argued heatedly that it couldn't be a collab, that Swearin must have just run into him by chance. Hikari couldn't stop laughing. She was glad she'd left a link to her uncle's channel in Swearin's comment section earlier. It was now paying off. What were the odds that her uncle would appear in the same dungeon area as a top streamer? The coincidence was almost too good to be true. As more and more people tuned in, donations and memberships began pouring in. Hikari could almost hear the sound of money rolling in her head. Her grin widened as she muttered to herself that her uncle truly was the best. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon, Swearin and her teammates stood frozen, watching Keita in awe. Moments earlier, they had been struggling to survive against just a few diamond frogs, monsters that even skilled adventurers found difficult to handle. Yet this man, wearing an office suit and wielding a simple metal bat, had annihilated them as if they were nothing. Swearin's mind was reeling. The way he moved, the precision, the sheer force. It was unlike anything she had seen before. A glittering gem rolled across the ground, a drop from one of the slain monsters. Keita wiped the sweat from his forehead with his handkerchief and muttered that this must be beginner level, good enough for some casual fun. Swearin was speechless. His comments sounded absurd, but he seemed completely serious. Keita looked at her calmly, asking what she had been thinking to trigger an alarm in a border zone. Her teammate protested, explaining that they hadn't done it on purpose. They had simply opened a treasure chest, and the siren had gone off. The chest had been empty, and they had no idea what had caused the alert. Swearin tried to defend her team, insisting that they were the victims, not the perpetrators. Keita, however, was cautious. He asked if she could prove it. In a place as dangerous as this, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Swearin studied him carefully. His strength, his composure, the metal bat, and that unshakable presence. It all matched the rumors. There was no doubt in her mind now. The man standing before her was the Shinjuku batter, the mysterious figure who had been making waves among adventurers lately. Hearing her mention live streaming, Keita seemed to realize that their words were being broadcast. Swearin told him that he could check the footage himself if he doubted their story. He nodded slightly, accepting that they were telling the truth, and wondered silently who could have set the trap. Swearin, regaining her composure, told him directly that she knew who he was, the famous, unbelievably strong man everyone had been talking about. Keita sighed lightly, and said he was just an ordinary civilian passing through. That made Swearin and her teammates blink in disbelief. Ordinary civilians didn't stroll into dungeons alone and wipe out elite monsters with a bat. They argued that there was no way he was average. Keita replied wryly that this was precisely what prejudice looked like. Then, with the same polite tone, he asked if they could please refrain from showing his face or discussing him publicly if their live stream was still active. One of the girls quickly assured him that the stream had already ended. But in hushed whispers, the team murmured among themselves, realizing that the Shinjuku Batter channel was still broadcasting and had even posted the link. They suspected that Keita was pretending not to know. Swearin whispered back that she didn't understand what was going on either, but since he had just saved them, they should keep quiet about it. The girls agreed. Keita noticed their secretive whispering and immediately assumed the worst. He thought they must be gossiping about him, probably calling him a creepy old man. Internally, he sighed and remarked to himself that young women these days were terrifying. He recognized Swearin from her channel's name. She was affiliated with Doom, one of the top streaming networks. Getting tangled up with someone from a major platform like that could only bring trouble. The best thing to do was to end the encounter quickly and leave. Keita decided to part ways. He turned around and began walking off, leaving the stunned group behind. Swearin blinked, then rushed after him, calling out for him to wait. When Keita turned to her, his face was expressionless, his tone dull as he asked what else she wanted. Swearin smiled faintly and told him not to look so annoyed. She insisted that she couldn't just leave things like this. She wanted to repay him somehow. Keita paused for a moment, then began to tell her a hypothetical situation. A bicycle suddenly ignored a red traffic signal and darted recklessly into the road. At the same moment, a large truck came barreling toward it, horns blaring, tires screeching. Swearin and her teammates were startled by the near accident, and she asked Keita if the person on the bicycle had been the one to dart out so carelessly. Keita responded calmly, explaining that if someone were capable of stopping such an accident by simply reaching out their hand at the right moment, it would be unpleasant to stand by and ignore it. He concluded that the only reason he had saved her earlier was so he wouldn't have to feel like a jerk for ignoring someone in danger. Therefore, she didn't need to thank him. It would only be troublesome. With that, Keita turned and began to walk away. Swearin stood frozen, irritation welling up inside her. She thought to herself how obnoxious he was, such a smug, infuriating geezer. Her teammates, still processing the whole ordeal, agreed in frustration. They muttered that just because he was strong didn't mean he could talk down to people so casually. As Keita's back faded into the distance, Swearin's irritation shifted into something else. Her cheeks flushed red as she found herself thinking that he was kind of cool. The contrast between his weary, worn-out eyes and his overwhelming strength fascinated her. There was something rugged, even noble, about it, and she couldn't help but admire it. Her teammates stared at her in disbelief, scolding her immediately. They told her not to get carried away, just because the live stream was over, warning her that if her fans saw that love-struck expression, it would cause chaos online. Meanwhile, the live stream Hikari had set up continued to explode in popularity, now skyrocketing past 51,427 viewers. The chat section was overflowing with excitement and speculation. Many praised Keita, saying they respected his style for not revealing his face. Others were curious about his identity, astonished that someone like him could appear out of nowhere and save Swearin so effortlessly. Some comments took a different tone. One user joked that if Swearin ended up dating an old man because of this, he'd lose his mind. Another viewer countered that Keita was undeniably strong and actually pretty cool. The stream was filled with a flood of opinions, jokes, and admiration. Watching the comments roll in, Hikari smirked proudly. It was exactly as she expected, or perhaps even better. Her uncle remained completely composed, refusing to be swayed by a beautiful woman. It was just like him, cool, disciplined, and detached. That was the man she admired. As she leaned back to rest, something about the situation caught her attention. Her eyes narrowed as she examined the trap that had caused Swearin's trouble earlier. Something about it fell off. When adventurers first acquire their skills, they often visualize them like a growing tree. The thick trunk representing the core skill that all awakened adventurers must learn, and the branching limbs symbolizing sub-skills that develop later. Hikari reflected on this analogy. Her own core skill was Stealth SSS, an extraordinary ability that allowed her to completely erase her presence and appearance. As she leveled up, she had gained several sub-skills. Ninja Art B, for example, which allowed her to transform her familiar into a drone, and even an appraisal ability that let her analyze objects and environments. Curious, she decided to appraise the suspicious treasure chest. The live chat exploded with interest, praising her quick thinking. But then, sharp-eyed viewers began to notice something odd. One commenter pointed out that the chest didn't look like the ones normally found in border areas. It was much shabbier. Others quickly agreed. Someone mentioned that it looked like a chest from an upper layer. Speculation erupted in the chat. Could someone have brought the chest down on purpose? The idea spread rapidly. Viewers theorized that it might be an MPK or monster player killer, someone who intentionally uses monsters to attack other adventurers. Hikari froze, realizing the same thing. If the chest had been placed there deliberately, that meant someone had specifically targeted Sueren's scheduled livestream. The thought sent a chill through her. Whoever set it up might still be nearby. Her mind raced, and then an idea struck her. She quickly summoned another of her familiar spirit drones, sending it to search the surrounding area. Moments later, as the camera feed came to life, her lips curled into a grin. She had found the culprit. Hikari's familiar spirit drones captured footage of a panicked man named Potato, surrounded by his equally anxious teammates. They asked him what to do next, but he snapped at them in frustration, cursing their luck for drawing such powerful monsters from the deeper layers of the dungeon. Watching the live feed on her phone, Hikari was startled. The faces were familiar. Both she and the commoners recognized them as members of Vergood. Meanwhile, Sueren was still chasing after Keita, determined to express her gratitude. She called out to him to wait, but Keita, as calm and detached as ever, declined. Sueren pleaded that she at least wanted to thank him, but he refused again. Blushing furiously, she finally gave up on thanking him, but asked for his contact information instead. Keita frowned and rejected that as well, his tone final. Sueren's teammates whispered among themselves about what a scene this had become. One of them was relieved that their live stream had cut off, until she noticed that Shinjuku Batter Channel was still live. Her expression turned to shock as she realized that Vergood was still streaming, completely unaware. On the stream, Potato could be heard angrily complaining that they were supposed to be the heroes who saved Sueren. One of his teammates tried to calm him down, saying it was just bad luck. Watching the scene, Sueren's teammates were furious. The livestream audience also reacted, calling Vergood out for their blunder. Then, someone in the comments noticed that one of the Vergood members was holding the same treasure chest that had triggered the earlier alarm. Realizing what this meant, Sueren's teammates immediately contacted her and Keita. They explained that the culprits who brought the chest were nearby and that they would go after them. Sueren nodded and cast a spell, Water Mirror. Ripples of magic spread through the air like water waves, detecting movements in the surroundings. Keita observed quietly, noting that it resembled sonar detection using water's ripples. Sueren quickly announced that she had located them and followed with another spell, Great Vortex. A massive torrent of swirling water surged forward, catching all the Vergood members completely off guard. One of Sueren's teammates remarked that the attack might have been launched from a bit too far away. Keita analyzed calmly that the spell was a wide-range magic that restrained enemies and adapted to terrain, perfect for prolonged combat. He acknowledged Sueren's decision as the correct one, and Sueren smiled, pleased by his approval. Back in a live stream, Hikari and the commoners watched as Keita suddenly emanated a powerful, intimidating aura. Even Sueren, standing beside him, could sense the pressure radiating from him. Meanwhile, Vergood was struggling within Sueren's raging torrent. Potato screamed in disbelief, furious at his misfortune, ordering his teammates to find a way out. They shouted back in panic, saying escape was impossible under the crushing waves. Even an adventurer's enhanced strength couldn't withstand it. Potato roared at them to shut up and vowed revenge on whoever had set him up. Then one of his teammates pointed in shock. Keita was approaching through the torrent. None of them recognized him and demanded to know who he was. Potato, gritting his teeth, ordered his team to open fire. A barrage of magic blasts shot toward Keita, engulfing him in smoke and flame. They began to cheer, thinking they'd defeated him, until the smoke cleared. Keita stood there, completely unharmed. Every Vergood member froze in disbelief. Potato, shaking, shouted for them to target Keita's feet instead. They fired again, destroying the ground beneath him, and for a moment, it looked like Keita was falling into the vortex below. But what happened next made their blood run cold. Instead of being swallowed by the water, Keita was running on it. Everyone watching the live stream was left speechless. In that instant, a voice from Keita's memory echoed in his mind, his former boss's voice. That loathsome man had once said he would teach Keita the secret art of working overtime. Keita remembered those words vividly, the way his boss used to bark them at him during endless nights of labor. He had told Keita that even if his body reached its limit, as long as he didn't lose consciousness, he could still keep working. The memory stung as Keita recalled his boss ordering him to keep moving his hands before passing out, to always move forward before stopping, like stepping with his left foot before his right one sank. Then do the same with the right. Repeat it endlessly, his boss had said, and he'd be able to run on water. Back then, Keita had dismissed it as an absurd metaphor, something impossible. Yet now, as he ran across the surface of the swirling vortex, he realized that his old boss had been right, in a twisted way. Compared to the unreasonable grind and soul-crushing exhaustion of his corporate life, running on water was effortless. Keita reached the very good members, his presence alone sending chills through them. Their screams filled the air as he hurled his metal bat straight into Potato's face. After striking him, Keita casually muttered an excuse, as though it were nothing. Clutching his broken nose, Potato trembled in terror. Swearin ran up to Keita in concern, addressing him respectfully. Keita frowned at being called sir. One of Swearin's teammates quickly whispered to her that Keita's channel was still live streaming, and she should watch what she said. Realizing this, Swearin blushed with guilt and nodded. Her teammate scanned the area, puzzled. She couldn't spot any visible drones filming the livestream. That meant the cameraman must have been using advanced stealth magic. Whoever was operating the feed had high-level concealment skills. On the stream, all the very good members appeared slumped against the rubble, humiliated and defeated. Swearin scolded them angrily, saying that their actions could have gotten her and her teammates killed. Keita suddenly knelt before them, and Potato glared warily, demanding to know what he was doing. As Keita looked into their faces, recognition flashed in his eyes. These were the same people who had once caused him endless overtime and misery. Rage welled up within him, and his presence became suffocating. He seized Potato by the collar and lifted him effortlessly, demanding to know what they were doing in this area. Panicking, Potato begged him to calm down. His eyes darted nervously as he tried to think of an excuse. He quickly claimed that Keita had mistaken them for someone else, that they hadn't done anything wrong. He protested that Keita had no right to attack him with magic and threatened to report him to the guild. Then, in frustration, he spat out insults, calling Keita a rude old man who needed to be taught a lesson. Keita stared at him silently, his expression unreadable. Potato, shaking with anger, hurled his sword toward the treasure chest. The impact triggered another alarm. The livestream commenters erupted, furious at Vergood and cheering for Keita to punish them. Potato laughed manically, calling out for strong monsters to appear. He taunted Keita, saying he shouldn't get cocky just because he was a little strong, mocking him as an old fart. He continued to insult him, jeering that a middle-aged newbie like him had no business acting tough. Keita began counting quietly. 1. Potato yelled for him to go to hell. But suddenly, from the triggered alarm, a small, peanut-shaped monster appeared. The audience burst into laughter. Comments flooded the stream, calling it Peanut Boy. The creature hopped around, throwing weak punches, utterly harmless. Potato froze, horrified by the ridiculous turn of events. Stammering, he claimed that it was all part of the plan, just a prank. He said he only wanted to collaborate with Swearin by summoning monsters for fun. Keita looked bored, unimpressed. He asked if Potato was implying that they had recklessly endangered others' lives just for entertainment. Then he continued counting, 2. Panicking, Potato tried to explain that they had meant to help Swearin, that everything was a misunderstanding. But Keita could tell he hadn't apologized once. His calmness vanished into cold fury. Potato, sweating, asked if Keita intended to forgive them. He nervously admitted that it was all a joke and begged Keita not to take it seriously. Keita finished his count, 3. In the next instant, his metal bat swung with tremendous force, striking Potato squarely and sending him flying through the air. The livestream audience exploded in laughter and awe, flooding the chat with cheers and calling it a home run. They joked that Potato was finished. Swearin's teammates snickered, saying Keita might have gone too far, hoping Potato wasn't actually dead. One of them urged Swearin that they should leave quickly. But Swearin, her face flushed bright red, stood frozen in place. Her heart raced as she muttered to herself, Shinjuku batter was just too cool. The next day, inside the Adventure Book Corporation sales department, Ukai approached Keita with excitement. She informed him that the team known as Vergood had apparently been expelled. Holding out her phone, she showed him the news article. Still focused on his computer, Keita replied without much interest. Ukai continued explaining that Vergood had caused a huge blunder during a live stream, which resulted in their adventurer licenses being revoked and their permanent expulsion from the guild. The story had already made headlines across multiple news outlets. Glancing at his phone, Keita checked the news for himself. Relieved, he confirmed that his own name wasn't mentioned anywhere. It seemed that Swearin and her team had kept their promise not to drag him into it. His mind drifted back to yesterday, when Swearin and her teammates had remarked that Vergood was finished, that their licenses would surely be revoked. At that time, Keita had grown tense, worrying that he might get caught up in their mess simply because he'd been at the scene. That would have been disastrous for him. All he wanted was to quietly enjoy his hobby without being noticed. Nervously, he had turned to Swearin and asked her a favor. Smiling brightly, Swearin had told him she'd gladly do anything he asked. Keita had then requested that if anyone ever asked her about what happened that night, she should leave his name out of it entirely. The women had been stunned by his request, but Swearin eventually nodded with a smile, agreeing to keep his identity secret, though she added that she wanted to ask a favor in return. The way she said it had made Keita uneasy, as if she were plotting something troublesome. Back in the office, Ukai cheerfully reported that the Shinjuku Batter channel had already surpassed 80,000 subscribers. She excitedly mentioned that she wished someone like him would collaborate with them, since big-name Doom streamers usually ignored small publishers like theirs. She sighed, lamenting that they'd probably never find a replacement for Very. Just then, a message notification popped up on Keita's screen from Swearin. He frowned, groaning inwardly, wondering what she wanted this time. Despite his reluctance, he ended up exchanging contact information with her, already feeling that it was going to be a major hassle. Ukai noticed his irritated expression and asked if he'd just gotten spammed. Keita agreed vaguely, saying that it was something like that, some young girl trying to lure him into a dating app, which he called despicable. Shocked, Ukai exclaimed that she had received those messages too. She shared how an idol once contacted her pretending to be friendly, and one of her classmates had even gotten scammed by something similar back in junior high. She then asked Keita if he used that same app. Keita admitted that he did, explaining that it was convenient for contacting his family. Ukai lit up at the coincidence and happily said that she used the same app as well. With a cheerful smile, she asked if they could exchange contact information. Keita froze, caught completely off guard. He stammered internally, desperately trying to come up with a polite excuse to decline. Ukai, meanwhile, smiled brightly, thrilled that she could finally ask him so naturally. She had apparently been waiting for a chance to exchange contact details for quite some time. Keita's anxiety grew, and he thought miserably about how troublesome this was becoming. Just then, their manager's voice called out from across the room, summoning them. Seizing the opportunity, Keita quickly stood up and urged Ukai to hurry, thanking his boss silently in his mind for saving him. Moments later, they stood in front of their weary-looking manager. Keita sighed inwardly, sensing that more trouble was coming. Their manager asked if they had managed to find a replacement for Very. Keita explained that it had only been a day, so they hadn't heard back from anyone yet. The manager nodded, understanding, then laid a magazine on the desk with a grim look. Keita immediately recognized it. It was their flagship publication. The manager said that there was a serious problem. Very's exclusive feature was scheduled to be serialized in full color as the magazine's centerpiece starting next week. All the advertising slots had already been filled with merchandise and sponsorships based on that feature. Losing it now meant financial chaos for the department. Keita pointed out that handling content was supposed to be the editorial department's job, not sales. The manager agreed, but explained that the editorial team was already swamped. Then she got straight to the point. She ordered Ukai to go pitch to Doom Pro and told Keita to accompany her for support. Ukai's eyes widened as she repeated the name. Doom Pro, as in Doom Production, the massive entertainment company managing multiple top-tier streamers with over 1 million subscribers each, including Swearin herself. The manager confirmed it. Ukai nervously asked if that meant they'd be given a larger budget for the deal. The manager smiled sweetly and told them no, their budget was still as tight as ever. She added that this was where their sales skills would be put to the test, and that she was counting on them. Keita and Ukai exchanged a horrified glance. Then in perfect unison, they shouted, "What?" Inside the office of Doom Production, Keita and a visibly nervous Ukai sat across from Kinya Kachidoki, the manager of Doom Production. With a cigarette between his fingers, Kinya assumed they were from a publishing company. Keita introduced himself and Ukai, thanking Kinya for meeting them on short notice, then explained that they were there to request a collaboration. He turned the discussion over to Ukai to present the details. After Ukai finished her explanation, Kinya leaned back, unimpressed, and remarked that the proposal was dull and pointless. Ukai hesitated, unsure how to respond. With a smirk, Kinya asked what Doom Production stood to gain from the collaboration, mocking the idea of working with a publication that only appealed to a handful of readers. He told them to return once they had tripled their circulation, boasting that even their least successful creator had that many subscribers. Keita quickly realized that Doom Production had no real intention of partnering with them, and that Kinya had only agreed to the meeting for formality's sake. Kinya went on to sneer that print media was outdated, saying it was laughable to talk about media influence when they were still producing magazines. He laughed and called the meeting a waste of time. However, his attitude suddenly shifted when his gaze lingered on Ukai's chest. He swallowed and told her that Doom Production was hosting a party that evening with a major industry figure and several popular live streamers. He said he could invite her if she wanted, suggesting that if she talked to the bigwig and managed to get him in a good mood, he might offer her a job. Ukai's face lit up for a moment, thinking it was a genuine opportunity, but Kinya's expression turned lewd as he added that she was pretty sexy. Ukai froze, confused by his tone, and Kinya grinned, explaining that if she could please the industry figure, it would make him look good as well. He told her she was an adult, implying she should understand what he meant. Ukai stiffened in shock, realizing the implication, and asked in disbelief if he was suggesting sexual favors in exchange for business. She pointed out that such a thing was a serious compliance violation. Kinya denied it with a smirk, saying he wasn't forcing her to do anything, just giving her a chance. If she wasn't interested, that was fine, but if she was, he'd let her talk to the big shot privately in a hotel room. Ukai's face went pale, her hands trembling as she struggled to respond. Keita exhaled heavily, stood up, and thanked Kinya for his time, stating firmly that they would be leaving. He took Ukai by the arm and guided her toward the door. Kinya called after them, protesting that they were just starting to get somewhere. Keita stopped, his tone turning cold. He said that in this era, anyone could share their thoughts with the world through social media, and that streamers with tens of thousands of followers avoided visiting adult establishments for fear of exposure. He added that their physical stamina often differed so greatly from ordinary people's that it strained sex workers, leading to them being refused service in many cases. Continuing, Keita said there had been a disturbing trend lately. Former streamers being used as escorts at hotel parties, where naive amateurs were lured in and forced into sex under the guise of networking or opportunity. Shubin magazine was rumored to be sitting on a bombshell scoop slated for next week. Keita hinted quietly that the story might involve people from Doom production and immediately asked Kinya to forget he had said anything. Kinya reacted with stunned fury, demanding to know how Keita could possibly know such a thing. Keita tugged Ukai along and left the office, leaving Kinya blustering. Once grabbed by the tie, Kinya exploded, insulting Keita and warning him not to underestimate a former streamer with a large following. His hand shot up to threaten Keita, but it was seized easily, and Keita gripped it harder, causing Kinya to wince. Keita judged Kinya to be weaker than he'd expected, decided the negotiation had failed, and the two visitors excused themselves and walked away. Outside the Doom production building, Ukai profusely thanked Keita for his intervention. Keita downplayed it and warned that the deal was off, meaning they should brace for their manager's wrath. He noted that Verigud's disgrace had left a massive hole in the magazine's schedule and wondered what they should do next. Back inside, Kinya seethed. His anger boiled over. When a subordinate came in to ask what was wrong, Kinya suddenly backhanded him, shattering the man's front tooth. Still drunk on rage, Kinya mocked the fallen employee, then smashed him again, ordered him to be quiet, and used him as an outlet for his fury. He slammed the man's head against the office window until the victim's face was a bloody ruin. Panting and snarling, Kinya swore that he would make Keita pay for humiliating him. Walking through the streets, Ukai asked Keita if the rumor about Shubun magazine was true. Keita replied that, for now, it was nothing more than unverified gossip circulating within the industry. Nothing they could print yet, but he was convinced that it was indeed true. The rumor claimed that people from Doom production were exploiting female clients who came seeking sales opportunities or collaborations, as well as streamers and fans who wanted to work with them, coercing them into sleeping with them. Keita silently questioned himself, wondering what he was doing, digging into the dark side of the entertainment industry in the name of securing business deals. Ukai then called his attention and asked if he had any plans for the evening. She wanted to thank him for his help earlier and invited him to go out for a drink. Blushing deeply, she thought triumphantly that she had finally done it. She had managed to ask him out. Keita, however, politely declined, saying it wasn't necessary and that she didn't have to worry about it. Ukai insisted, saying she really wanted to treat him. Keita responded that looking out for his colleagues was part of his job, so there was no need for her to feel indebted. Besides, he already had dinner plans that night. Ukai, a bit startled, immediately asked if it was a date or some kind of singles event. Keita told her it was nothing like that. His sister and niece had asked him to take them out to dinner. Hearing this, Ukai was surprised and told him he'd make a great father someday. Keita laughed awkwardly, saying that was unlikely to happen. Afterward, they reported to their manager that their meeting didn't go as planned and apologized. Keita then informed his manager that he was heading out for dinner with his family. His manager, irritated, demanded how he could say something like that at such time. Still, Keita managed to escape working overtime. At the train station, Keita realized he was running late. Checking his phone, he looked for the meeting place. Hikari had messaged him earlier, saying their mother would be coming too, and she sent the address of the restaurant. It turned out to be an old-style beer hall, exactly the kind of place Keita liked. He thought his sister really knew him well. As he boarded the crowded train, he noted how muggy the day was, but that beer always tasted best on days like this. He wondered if his sister had come into some money, treating him to dinner in Ginza. Though he worried slightly about bringing his niece to a beer hall, he figured it was fine since his sister was a big drinker herself. His mouth watering, he eagerly imagined downing a king-size beer that night. Lost in thoughts of beer, Keita was suddenly grabbed by the shoulder. A man behind him accused him of something, saying he knew what Keita had done and ordered him to get off at the next station. Keita was stunned, as was the short-haired girl standing nearby. The man shoved his phone in Keita's face, showing a video of him with his salivating expression from earlier. It was from a live streamer known as Pervert Repellent Mamru, who had 38,000 subscribers. The streamer had captured Keita's expression on video and was now exposing his disgusting face to the public. In a loud, accusing voice, Mamoru declared that Keita had groped the woman standing beside him. He proclaimed that Keita couldn't deny it. He had captured the act on video, and they were heading straight to the police. Keita, still bewildered by the sudden accusation, told Mamoru that there must be a mistake, pointing out that both of his hands had been occupied. Mamoru shouted back, claiming that even if Keita had only brushed against the woman with his arm or the back of his hand, or even just leaned close enough to smell her, that alone was enough to brand him a pervert. According to Mamoru, that was common sense. Introducing himself loudly, Mamoru boasted that, with his 38,000 subscribers, he was well connected with local police officers and demanded that Keita show his ID. The short-haired girl, clearly uncomfortable, intervened. She said that Mamoru was mistaken. She hadn't been groped, and it was all just a misunderstanding. But Mamoru refused to listen, insisting that sometimes victims didn't even realize they were being groped. He shoved his phone toward her, showing her the video he had recorded, and pressured her to admit that Keita was clearly guilty. The girl, irritated, told Mamoru that he was being a nuisance and asked him to delete the video. Mamoru's eyes widened in disbelief. He refused, claiming that what he was doing was for the good of society and that she couldn't just let such a thing go unpunished. He told her to leave it to him, brushing her off self-righteously. The girl was speechless, her expression turning to anger. Meanwhile, Keita sighed and sent a message to Hikari, telling her that something had come up and he would be late. Mamoru noticed and barked at Keita, demanding to know who he was messaging, warning him not to act independently, and calling him a pervert again. Keita, maintaining his composure, told Mamoru to stop shouting. He was frightening the woman. Then he turned to the short-haired girl and politely asked if she could spare a moment. She agreed, unsure of what he wanted. Keita apologized to her and asked if she would be willing to get off at the next station with him. He wanted to consult the station staff and explain that he hadn't groped her, and he hoped she could testify on his behalf. The girl agreed, saying that they would clear up the misunderstanding together. Mamoru, grinning smugly, suddenly bolted toward the train doors. He yelled that he was done and shouted, "Forget it! Bye for now!" before escaping from the carriage. Keita called after him in disbelief, but Mamoru yelled back for him to shut up, once again calling him a groper as he fled. Around them, the other passengers began whispering. Murmurs rippled through the train, people expressing disgust, saying that Keita looked like the type that he should go to hell. Some said that old men with lecherous expressions were always gropers. Others whispered about taking pictures of him to post online and warn others. Keita noticed how quickly the crowd's mood shifted. Everyone seemed to accept the accusation without question, spreading malicious rumors and branding him guilty on the spot. Something about the way they acted felt off, too coordinated, too uniform. He began to suspect it was a setup, a deliberate attempt to frame him. The short-haired girl wanted to chase after Mamoru, but Keita told her he could do it instead, yet that would only cause more commotion and inconvenience everyone around them. As he thought through the situation, one name came to mind: Kenya. Whenever there was trouble, that man always seemed to be involved somehow. The girl told Keita she had no idea why someone like Mamoru would target her. Keita replied that it was a coincidence, for her, at least. For him, it felt more like revenge in disguise. The girl hesitated, then suggested that if things got messy later, it might cause problems. She asked if they could exchange contact information, just in case. Keita seemed reluctant at first, thinking it over silently. After a moment, he agreed, saying she was right. It was best to do so just in case. The girl noticed his hesitation and thought he seemed genuinely uneasy about it. Meanwhile, at a convenience store, Hikari wondered what kind of trouble her uncle had gotten himself into. She hoped he was all right. The part about her mother coming along for dinner had been a lie. With a small, mischievous smirk, she thought to herself that tonight was her turn to reward him. The table was filled with a spread of delicious dishes and frosty mugs of beer. Hikari cheerfully urged her uncle to raise his glass. They clinked their drinks, and Keita, flushed with happiness, drank deeply. He was visibly delighted, savoring the taste. Hikari watched him with satisfaction and asked how it was. His face already turning red from the alcohol, Keita replied that it was excellent. Hikari smiled, saying she was glad he liked it. He'd been working so hard lately, so tonight he should just relax and enjoy himself. Keita was moved by her thoughtfulness and thanked his niece warmly. Inside, though, he reminded himself that he needed to be the responsible adult, the dependable uncle. Yet the memory of what had happened earlier on the train resurfaced, and he couldn't help but crave another drink. Hikari noticed a shift in his expression and asked if something was wrong. Keita dismissed her concern, saying it was nothing, though his fingers were already unconsciously counting to 2, a small tell of his unsettled mind. He decided that tonight was special and that he should set his worries aside for now. Changing the subject, he asked where her mother was. Hikari twitched slightly at the question, caught off guard. Thinking quickly, she lied, saying her mother was still at work but had left money for them so they could eat whatever they wanted. Keita nodded, saying that if his sister was that busy, she really didn't have to go out of her way to be so considerate. Hikari let out a quiet sigh of relief. Her uncle had believed her. She thought to herself that this evening was actually her gift to him, something she'd arranged just to make him happy. Keita then mentioned that he'd always wondered what exactly her mother did for a living. Hikari, slightly uneasy, said that she didn't really know. Her mother didn't tell her much and only mentioned that she worked as some kind of handmade artisan. Keita frowned in thought. Even keeping her own daughter in the dark, that was suspicious. He couldn't help but wonder what his sister was really involved in. He brushed the thought aside and told Hikari that it had been a long time since they'd had a proper conversation like this. He asked about school, wondering if everything was going well. Hikari giggled, teasing that it was such a typical uncle thing to ask. Keita chuckled, saying he knew it sounded stuffy, but he genuinely wanted to know. Hikari said she was doing great. She'd made new friends, found something she enjoyed doing, and every day felt fulfilling. Keita smiled proudly, saying that was wonderful. Curious, he asked what she'd been up to lately. At that, Hikari stiffened slightly. Her thoughts scrambled as she tried to come up with a safe answer. She couldn't exactly tell him that she'd secretly started a live, streaming channel featuring him, her uncle, and that her videos had been racking up thousands upon thousands of views. Before she could say anything, Keita's phone began to ring. Hikari quickly pointed it out to him. Seeing the caller ID, Keita muttered that it was his manager. He gulped down the rest of his beer, muttering that maybe he'd just pretend he hadn't seen the call. But Hikari insisted he should answer. Reluctantly, Keita stood and excused himself from the table. Answering the phone, he heard his manager apologize for calling so late. Then, without hesitation, she asked if he had groped anyone. Keita froze, frowning in disbelief. His manager explained that a streamer calling himself Pervert Repellent Mamrukan, who claimed to run a channel dedicated to fighting sexual harassment, had uploaded a video accusing Keita. None of the streamer's previous videos had been particularly convincing, but this one had caused an unexpected stir. Keita admitted there had been some trouble, but it had only happened about an hour earlier. His manager replied that the timing sounded far too convenient. She told him that his face was blurred in the video, and there was no information that could identify his company. Yet, somehow, the video had been singled out as being about S from a book company. Keita was stunned. His manager continued. The company had received a direct message on their official social media account, informing them that one of their employees had been accused of sexual harassment and asking how the company intended to respond. Keita was shocked. He apologized to his manager for the trouble, surmising that he had been set up. His manager wondered who Keita had gotten on the wrong side of, stating that she didn't believe he was the type to grow people, as Keita cared more about self-preservation than his libido. Keita smiled, pleased that his manager understood him so well. His manager noted that the setup was too well planned to be the work of a small-time streamer. Keita agreed, guessing that someone bigger was behind it. Both concluded that the only person who came to mind, based on recent events, was Kinya Kachidoki, the manager of Doom Production. Keita's manager became furious, ranting about how the largest company in the industry would make a sleazy proposition to one of their sales reps, get rejected, and then resort to harassment. Keita agreed, but pointed out they lacked evidence and needed to consider how to deal with the situation. His manager calmed down and agreed, although she felt Keita should have been more upset. She told him that they would discuss the best course of action the next morning. Keita informed her that he had the contact information for the woman allegedly harassed and had already spoken with the station staff. His manager assured him that the video itself had little evidential value and hadn't spread widely, so it would be impossible to blame him. Keita confirmed that the company would not take any disciplinary action against him, to which his manager confirmed her trust in him. She emphasized her hatred for scumbags who offered sex for business and idiots who tried to skew social justice. Keita offered to return to the office, but his manager insisted he enjoy his dinner with his family and even apologized for interrupting him before ending the call. Keita thanked his boss. Clenching his phone, he mused that it was true there was no solid evidence, just a post with blurring and anonymity. He speculated that the perpetrators kept their efforts to a minimum, knowing their evidence wasn't strong enough, and attempting to sue the Mamoru-kun guy would be pointless. He observed that bad guys are always good at protecting themselves. Keita then sneezed at the thought of the disgusting bastards. Behind him, a waiter nervously called out to Keita, noticing the oppressive aura emanating from him. For Keita, it wasn't the framing itself that infuriated him, but the fact that they had involved his company, his colleagues, and ruined his family time. He fumingly counted to 3. A few moments later, Keita returned to Hikari, now buffed up and filled with a grim aura. Hikari choked at the intimidating sight, nervously asking her uncle what was wrong and if everything was okay. Keita smiled and assured her everything was fine, but Hikari was creeped out. She watched as Keita chugged a handful of beer in one gulp. He admitted that there had been a little trouble at work. Hikari stood up, told her uncle not to worry about her, and offered to take a taxi home so he could return to work. Keita thanked her for her kindness and handed her a bill, insisting it was to make up for ruining her kind gesture and asking her to keep the change as pocket money. Hikari tried to protest, but Keita wasn't listening. Watching him leave, Hikari had a hunch. She immediately logged in to the Shinjuku Batter official channel and posted a breaking news announcement that the Shinjuku Batter would be live streaming a fierce batting session tonight. Commenters immediately popped up, expressing their anticipation. Hikari kissed her phone and called the waiter for the check. She didn't know what was happening, but she wasn't going to leave her uncle alone. Meanwhile, at the batting cage, Keita paid for an hour. The storekeeper confirmed the usual 500 yen fee. Keita, however, had other plans. He was still fuming at the thought of the industry leader who forces people to sleep with them for business and the streamer who frames people for sexual harassment. Filthy scum who made one wonder if their brains resided in their nether regions. Keita informed the storekeeper that tonight he was going to the Incubus Palace, planning to beat those lust-filled monsters to a pulp. The Incubus Palace was a dungeon that took the form of Shinjuku's Kabukicho red light district. Some believe that space and time had warped, merging the former pleasure district with a dungeon to create this distorted realm. During the Great Dungeon Disaster, chaos erupted here, countless lives were lost. Even among other dungeons, this one stood out for its strange and perilous nature, filled with monsters and demons born from raw sexual desire. Within the twisted streets, monstrous voices echoed. They shouted fragments of human obsession. One cried out about an average-looking man, another about a muscular businessman, another about a boyfriend shirt, a crisp white dress shirt with sleeves rolled up. Others chanted about glasses, plain, nerdy glasses, fixated on every trivial fetish. Keita arrived, facing down one of the demons of lust. He came here from time to time. The creature's gaze locked onto him, repeating words like big, buff, beefy hunk, yum yum yum, its desire palpable. Keita swung without hesitation. His blow sent the monster flying, crashing into a nearby building. Watching the explosion of dust and debris, Keita muttered to himself, rating the strike a 10. It was a beautiful explosion. Nothing beat the satisfaction of blasting away these sex-driven fiends. His mind wandered as he exhaled. Corporate abuse of power, sleazy deals, harassment, false accusations, and endless stress. His life as a salaryman had been filled with it all. For so long, he had suppressed his frustration, burying it deep inside. Now, this dungeon was his outlet. He would take it all out on them. He took another step forward. Elsewhere, Hikari, who was watching and streaming the scene, screeched in fear. It was terrifying. There was no way she could deactivate her SSS rank stealth in a place like this. The danger was too high. The Shinjuku Incubus Palace was dominated by demons, creatures that had physical damage and resisted most forms of magic. Losing to them meant being subjected to sexual acts, regardless of gender. Hikari suddenly froze. A demon stood right behind her. Before she could react, Keita had already dashed forward, shouting about filthy monsters who groped people on crowded trains. His words echoed with fury as he struck, sending a crushing blow to the demon's groin. The creature let out a guttural groan as its body crumpled, and something unspeakable flew through the air. Startled, Hikari gasped at the violent impact. She reassured herself that her uncle wouldn't die from something like this. He was far too strong. The livestream chat filled with comments. Viewers joked that Keita seemed to be in a bad mood. Some wondered if something had happened. Another commented that it was understandable. Riding the train these days felt unbearable. Someone else speculated that maybe he was just feeling guilty about something, which drew shocked reactions from others. Hikari watched, both tense and relieved. Her uncle was incredibly strong. Knowing he could handle himself made everyone watching feel safer. Keita's voice roared once more across the battlefield, filled with righteous fury. He cursed those who demanded sexual favors in business, calling them brain-in-your-balls bastards, and unleashed another devastating strike. Another crash followed, a thunderous impact shaking the area. The viewers' comments erupted again, marveling at how exhilarating it all looked. Even if they couldn't see Keita's face, they could tell. He must have been feeling utterly refreshed. A comment appeared on the livestream, suggesting that Keita must have a lot of pent-up stress. The commenter added a wish for him to eat something delicious, along with a 10,000 yen super chat. Hikari's eyes widened in delight. They had just received a super chat. Meanwhile, Keita stood amidst the ruins of the defeated monsters, composed and calm. He glanced around, scanning the area to ensure no enemies remained. Hikari cheerfully responded to the viewers, expressing her gratitude for the generous donation. Having loyal followers who supported their adventures made her proud. Their channel had finally reached monetization, so ads were now appearing on their stream. Hikari, smiling to herself, thought about the future. Once she earned enough, she would give everything to her uncle. That way, he could quit his soul-crushing corporate job and live peacefully, streaming together with her. The thought made her laugh softly. Her laughter was abruptly cut off by a blinding flash from above. Something streaked through the air and pierced the ground near Keita. It was a spear. Keita immediately turned toward it, wary, wondering who had thrown it. The weapon suddenly began to hum with energy, releasing a violent sphere of power. Reacting instantly, Keita leapt backward, narrowly avoiding the surge. Then, without hesitation, he struck the sphere with his weapon, deflecting the energy. A deafening roar followed as the shockwave tore through the area. The stream went black. Hikari's eyes widened in confusion. Her broadcast had suddenly been cut off. The chat exploded with frantic messages. Viewers wondered if the signal had dropped or if the drone capturing the footage had been destroyed. Some worried if the old man was in danger, but others reassured them, saying he was far too overpowered to be taken down. Several begged for the stream to be restored. Hikari's mind raced. Could it be that her uncle had realized she was live-streaming him? When the dust finally cleared on Keita's side, the spear that had been embedded in the ground vanished. Startled, Keita turned, only to see the spear reappear in the hand of a woman standing behind him. The woman moved swiftly, circling behind him in a blur of motion. Keita's instincts flared. He reacted just in time, narrowly dodging her slash. Their weapons clashed with a sharp metallic ring. For an instant, tension hung in the air. Then Keita, realizing something, stopped himself. The woman hesitated, lowering her weapon. Her expression darkened with guilt as she noticed Keita's human appearance. She quickly bowed her head and apologized. Keita told her to be more aware of her surroundings. She apologized again, explaining that she hadn't realized anyone else was present. Hidden nearby, Hikari watched quietly, remaining perfectly still. Her SSS-rank stealth skill kept her invisible. It seemed Keita hadn't noticed her presence. She reasoned that her familiar spirit drone had likely been caught in the area of effect blast earlier, which was why the stream had gone down. Still, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Why was this woman here? Before her stood one of the top-tier streamers from Doom Production, a powerhouse equal in rank to Swearin, and a platinum-ranked solo artist known for her unmatched physical combat skills. The woman wielding the spear was none other than Senna, the Spear Dancer, with an incredible 1.023 million subscribers. Spear Dancer Senna was the brightest star of Doom Production. Unlike Swearin, whose public persona was widely known through social media and mainstream outlets, Senna's private life was completely veiled in mystery. That aura of secrecy only amplified her appeal, making her one of the most enigmatic and beloved dungeon streamers in existence. Her latest music video had already exceeded 300 million streams, and she had been chosen to perform the theme song for the upcoming 10-piece movie. A prodigious soloist, Senna never joined parties, nor did she accept donations or tips during dungeon expeditions. Even when her promotional videos went viral, she refused to run ads or monetize her streams. Her only sources of income were her merchandise and her music, a testament to her independence and principle. Hikari, watching from her concealed vantage point, could hardly believe it. What was one of the most famous streamers and artists in Japan doing here, of all places? If this footage went public, it would explode in popularity. A live collaboration between Keita, Swearin, and now Senna. Her uncle would become an absolute legend. Excited, Hikari prepared to resume the stream. Still, she knew she had to be careful. If Senna was currently broadcasting her own official stream, Hikari could get into serious trouble for overlapping. To avoid any conflict, she decided to blur Senna's face and mute their voices. The familiar spirit drone buzzed softly as it came back online. Keita's ears perked up. He thought he heard something mechanical, faint but present. Moments later, the live stream returned, and comments immediately flooded in. Viewers expressed relief that the feed was restored and asked if the old man was safe. Then, one comment stood out, shocked disbelief turning into chaos in the chat. Several users noticed the blurred figure beside Keita. Despite the obscured face, some fans began recognizing her. The realization spread rapidly. It was Senna. The chat exploded with excitement. Viewers couldn't believe it. Super chats poured in one after another, fans losing their composure, some dropping another 10,000 yen. It was pandemonium. Meanwhile, Senna glanced at Keita, sensing his unease, and asked if something was wrong. He replied that it was nothing, though deep inside, He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was observing them. Maybe it was just his imagination. Composing himself, Keita asked if her earlier attack was simply a misunderstanding. Senna confirmed it was, apologizing earnestly. She explained that she had poor eyesight and had mistaken him for a monster. Keita sighed, reminding her that attacking a person with a legendary weapon could easily have killed them, and told her not to do it again. In this world, most adventurers wielded weapons discovered inside dungeons. Many of these items appeared in multiple copies, allowing them to be replicated and sold through guilds. However, a few rare artifacts existed that modern technology could not reproduce. Ever since the dungeons emerged, adventurers had sought these mythical items, legendary treasures. The spear Senna held was one such treasure. Its name was Gi Bald the Destruction, a weapon of devastating power and mythic origin. There was no doubt, this woman was indeed Senna, one of Doom Productions' most powerful and famous streamers. Keita recognized her now. He had even seen her perform during the New Year's Eve music special. He could only hope she wasn't live streaming at that very moment. Scanning the surroundings, he saw no one else around. Curious, Keita asked about her supposed poor eyesight. If she was nearsighted, shouldn't she wear glasses or contact lenses? Senna replied that she avoided them during combat since they could break. Keita nodded, but inwardly, he knew she was lying. Without warning, he launched an attack. His strike came swift and sharp. Senna managed to block the blow, sliding backward from the impact. Her expression shifted immediately. Her playful tone vanished, replaced with the seriousness of a true warrior. She lunged forward, her spear slicing through the air in a blur of deadly precision. Keita countered each move, defending against her relentless offensive. Sparks flew as their weapons collided. Senna's movements grew sharper, faster, until she unleashed a high-speed slash that Keita narrowly parried. The stream's viewers went wild. The sudden clash stunned them. Comments filled the feed, shouting in awe at the sight. Spear Dancer versus the Shinjuku Batter. It was a duel of incredible skill and tension, an impossible crossover between two legends. Senna spun and aimed a powerful kick, but Keita intercepted her perfectly. His metal bat halted inches from her face, the air thick with silence. Senna froze, her breath catching as the dust settled between them. Keita lowered his bat. She examined it closely and frowned, remarking that she couldn't feel any trace of magic power from it. Could it be just an ordinary product? Keita confirmed it. His bat was merely a rental item from a batting cage. Senna laughed dryly, saying her legendary spear might cry if it knew such a mundane weapon had stopped it. She then asked if his technique was based on traditional staff combat. Keita said no. He admitted he was only imitating moves he had seen. During long, lonely nights of overtime, he practiced by himself, mimicking the martial arts scenes from movies he liked, especially an old kung fu film he admired. Senna was taken aback. Imitations? He nodded. He simply borrowed movements from movies and manga to fight monsters. But more than anything, Keita knew her story about bad eyesight had been a lie. Keita observed Senna carefully and pointed out something peculiar. She fought with her eyes closed. That explained why she had mistaken him for an enemy earlier. She literally couldn't tell friend from foe during battle. Senna questioned whether Keita had deliberately fought her just to confirm that fact. Keita admitted that he had. The first strike he used was a move that couldn't be avoided through visual reaction alone. It required instinct and reflex beyond sight. He knew it wasn't his place to meddle, but he felt there had to be a reason why she kept her eyes shut. Senna asked whether he went through all that effort just to make such a point. Keita answered yes. He said that adventurers often claimed not to fear death because resurrection was possible. People came back to life so easily now that the value of a single life had grown cheap. But in truth, dying was terrifying. Even if one's body revived unscathed, the mind and spirit could break beyond repair. He had seen that happen countless times. People crushed by fear that never left them, haunted forever by the memory of dying helplessly to something far stronger than themselves. That terror, he said, was incomparable. And if Senna continued fighting as she did now, even if not today, one day that same fate would find her. He didn't like preaching to strangers he met by chance, but he knew he'd regret it if he stayed silent. So he spoke his piece and apologized for interfering. Senna shook her head. She didn't mind. In fact, she was grateful. Quietly, she confessed the truth. She was too frightened to open her eyes. Her primary ability was the mind's eye, a rare skill with no known equivalents. Its rank exceeded even the highest classifications, recorded as extraordinary, or simply EX. When she activated the skill, her awareness shifted to a detached, elevated view, much like watching herself from a third-person camera in a video game. It granted her near-total spatial perception and heightened reaction speed, to the point where the flow of time seemed to slow down around her. Keita remarked that it sounded remarkably convenient, likely even effective against stealth users. Senna confirmed that her mind's eye could detect any ability up to rank without fail. Hidden nearby, Hikari let out a silent sigh of relief. Her stealth ability was ranked SSS, beyond what Senna's perception could reach. She remained invisible, safe for now. Senna went on to explain that she had awakened her mind's eye 18 years ago, when she was only 4 years old. Keita immediately recalled what had happened 18 years ago, the dungeon destruction. Senna's voice softened as she recounted it. On that day, she had been separated from her parents as chaos erupted. A massive surge of monsters had spilled from the dungeon, overwhelming the city. The memory unfolded vividly, streets torn apart, screams echoing through the smoke. A small child, lost and terrified, ran through the carnage while a swarm of goblins chased her down. One caught up, its claws slashing through the air. Pain shot through the child's body as the creature's talons tore into her face. Blood ran down her cheeks. The goblins surrounded her, snarling, their crude laughter mixing with her cries. The little girl screamed and screamed, blinded by agony and terror. Through the chaos, a man appeared, a lone figure cutting through monsters with raw fury. Each strike was accompanied by a curse. How could such creatures do this? How could he let it happen? He reached the child at last and crushed the goblins with brutal force, his breath ragged with rage and grief. Dropping to his knees, he gathered the girl in his arms. Trembling as guilt and helplessness overwhelmed him. He scolded himself bitterly. What was the point of becoming strong if he couldn't make it in time? What good was power if he couldn't protect anyone? With shaking hands, he took out a handkerchief and gently covered the child's injured eyes. His voice softened as he whispered comfort, calling the small, broken-figure boy. He told the child that everything would be all right. Keita's voice from the memory echoed. He would protect the child at all costs. Senna's thoughts drifted back to the past. The memory of that day lingered in her heart like a faint, unhealed scar. She remembered the man who had saved her, the kind soul who had carried her to safety when she was on the verge of death from her eye injury. He had fought fiercely, risking his life to protect her, defeating monsters along the way to find a healing potion that could save her. Even now, she wondered where that man was and what had become of him. Keita quietly asked what had happened to her parents after that incident. Senna blinked, realizing she had shared too much of her past, and apologized. After a pause, she explained that, despite everything, both her parents had survived. Keita's shoulders relaxed slightly. He was relieved to hear it. Senna then asked about him. Keita replied that he had also gone through a rough time back then. Inwardly, however, his thoughts grew heavy. He remembered his own failure, the helplessness that had consumed him. He had survived, but that was all. When he discovered that the shelter he was trying to reach had already been attacked by monsters, it was too late. Everyone inside had been slaughtered. He hadn't been able to save a single soul, not even the boy he had promised to protect. His grip tightened around the handle of his metal bat. Senna, unaware of his inner turmoil, smiled softly and said she was glad he had survived too. Her words startled him. There was no trace of pity in her expression, only genuine warmth. She continued, admitting that the reason she had become an adventurer was to find and thank the man who had saved her life. But after she reunited with her parents amid the confusion at the shelter, she never managed to meet him again. The chaos of that day had swallowed him up. So, she thought, if she became famous enough, perhaps that person would one day see her and reach out. Keita listened quietly. He understood her reasoning all too well. Senna added that ever since then, she had been terrified of monsters. She couldn't face them with her eyes open. The memories were too deeply etched into her. That was why she fought alone. Coordinating with others was difficult when she couldn't even meet their gaze, but solitude made her feel safer. Keita observed that she had still managed to notice his skill almost instantly. Senna explained that it was mostly instinct. Her mind's eye allowed her to perceive things that most people would miss. Keita nodded, then told her, half chiding, half kind, that someone had gone to great lengths to save her life once. Because of that, she shouldn't overdo it. If she got herself killed, that person would be devastated. He added wryly that he didn't like seeing young people get hurt. It pained him. He called himself a delicate old man, and that drew a faint smile from Senna. Inwardly, she thought he was an interesting person. There was something about his words, his tone, his presence that stirred something faintly familiar in her. Curious, she asked why he was in such a dangerous place to begin with. Keita replied that it was just his hobby. He came here to practice batting. Her expression flickered. That face, the way he moved, even the sound of his voice, it reminded her of someone. Could it be? For a fleeting moment, she thought he resembled the man from her childhood memory. But she quickly dismissed the idea. The man from back then hadn't been this muscular. Maybe Keita just had one of those familiar faces. She looked at him again, tilting her head. Come to think of it, he also looked a bit like the guy she'd seen earlier today on the train. But no, it had to be coincidence. Meanwhile, the live chat continued buzzing. The viewers couldn't hear their conversation since Hikari had muted the audio, and their faces were blurred. Still, fans speculated in the comments. Some said the two seemed to be having a serious talk. Others remarked that just seeing them alive and full of energy made them happy, and one viewer dropped another 10,000 yen super chat. Another joked that Keita was probably lecturing the girl for being too slow in the fight. Watching from her stealth position, Hikari grew uneasy. The situation was calm, too calm. Their conversation was going smoothly, almost tenderly. From a streamer standpoint, that was a problem. If nothing exciting happened soon, the viewership would drop. She needed something to spice things up. As she brainstormed how to fix the pacing, an unexpected voice suddenly cut through the air. Someone shouted, "Cut!" Startled, Hikari looked around. A man holding a professional camera emerged from the shadows, striding toward them. Keita turned sharply, eyes narrowing, and demanded to know who the man was. The man introduced himself as Dan, a freelance videographer in charge of Senna's current shoot. The moment his name appeared on the live feed, the comment section exploded in recognition. Many viewers knew exactly who he was, Dan, the legendary cameraman who worked behind the scenes of high-profile productions. One commenter noted that even Swearin, who rarely interacted with others, would rely on Dan whenever filming deep within the dungeons. Another explained that Dan was known more for shooting polished promotional or music videos than for live streams, since those jobs paid far better. Dan smiled courteously at Keita, greeting him, while the comments continued to buzz. Someone wondered aloud how the viewers seemed to know so much about him. Where did they even find that information? Keita, slightly wary, asked whether Dan was currently live streaming with his camera and requested that he refrain from including him. Dan dismissed the idea immediately, claiming he despised live streaming because there was no room for creative control. No editing, no artistry, just raw chaos. He proudly called himself an artist. Another viewer added that, despite his striking and somewhat foreign-looking features, Dan was in fact completely Japanese. Senna explained to Keita that Dan was the videographer she always hired to film her music videos. Keita remarked that Dan must be quite daring to film inside a dungeon, where danger lurked everywhere. He assumed Dan would use drones or remote equipment for such work, but Dan replied confidently that he could handle himself in combat too. Keita silently marveled at how vast and unpredictable the world was. Never had he imagined meeting someone like this deep in a dungeon. Dan joked that he had never expected to find anyone who could split the bill with Senna either. Senna quickly apologized for not introducing herself earlier and formally introduced both herself and the purpose of their visit. Today's shoot was for the music video of her new song. Keita frowned slightly at Dan's phrasing and questioned whether splitting the bill was even the right term to use, before waving it off and saying he didn't need a lesson in linguistics. Dan laughed it off and explained that the original plan was for Senna to perform a dance sequence with a new artist who was about to debut. Keita expressed surprise. If there was a new talent capable of keeping up with Senna's level, that would be impressive. Dan threw up his hands dramatically, declaring that such a person didn't exist. The higher-ups, he complained, had no understanding of the realities of production. But as a freelancer, if he dared to talk back, he'd be blacklisted instantly. Senna, half amused and half concerned, said that she would be in serious trouble if that ever happened. There was no one else as skilled as Dan. Dan chuckled and thanked her, though he told her she really ought to try working with other videographers once in a while. Then, with a heavy sigh, Dan muttered about the rookie who had been scheduled to appear. The newbie hadn't even managed to reach the Incubus Palace before giving up. Keita muttered that the situation sounded absurd. Another case of unreasonable demands from out-of-touch management who never set foot in the field. Dan nodded in agreement. Senna remarked that Keita seemed to understand such frustrations rather well. He admitted that he'd had a similar experience not long ago. Senna quietly wondered to herself what exactly had happened to him. Keita then asked whether the missing rookie was safe. Dan waved off the concern, saying that the newcomer had already escaped the dungeon long ago, likely sipping tea somewhere safe outside. He grumbled that amateurs were always like that. Then, in an almost impulsive tone, he turned to Keita and proposed that he take the rookie's place in the shoot instead. Clasping his hands together, Dan tried to appeal to Keita's sense of goodwill. He insisted that with Keita's participation, he could create the most spectacular promotional video yet. His enthusiasm only deepened when he noticed Keita's expression, one that clearly radiated reluctance. Dan laughed knowingly, saying he could tell that Keita didn't want to do it. Keita confirmed that assumption plainly. Realizing his mistake, Dan apologized for being too abrupt and promised to make a formal offer. The chat, meanwhile, was in a frenzy. Viewers were desperate to see Keita's expression. One viewer sent a 10,000 yen donation demanding a face reveal. Another immediately followed with 20,000 yen, saying they were dying to see what Keita looked like. A third message popped up, echoing their curiosity. Back in the dungeon, Dan tried to sweeten the deal. He assured Keita that his name would appear in the official credits and that Doom Production would compensate him properly. But before Dan could even mention the amount, Keita interrupted, saying that money wasn't the issue. He simply didn't like being in the spotlight. Dan pondered for a moment, then offered an alternative. Keita's face and name would not be revealed. They would use CGI to replace his appearance entirely, leaving only his movements intact. His involvement would be kept a secret from the company, and Dan would personally pay him out of his own pocket. Keita, still unsure, asked if Dan was truly willing to go that far, especially since he wasn't even an employee of Doom Production. Dan's answer was immediate and fervent. Of course he was. He was completely captivated by the idea of Keita and Senna performing together. He declared that he would spend every last yen he had for the chance to film them side by side. It was his commitment as a professional videographer. Senna turned to Keita and, with an earnest expression, said that she too wanted him to appear in the video, if he didn't mind. Keita looked surprised, caught off guard by her request. Senna continued, explaining that when she was scheduled to perform with the original partner, she had been forced to hold back. But with Keita, she felt she could truly give her all. She didn't want to compromise the quality of her work. For the sake of the fans who were waiting for her song and dance, she wanted to deliver her best possible performance. Keita adjusted his glasses thoughtfully and considered her words. He glanced at his watch, noting that the bat he was using was a rental, 500 yen per hour, with only 30 minutes left on the clock. Senna quickly apologized for taking up his time. Keita simply replied that he planned to clear the dungeon within the remaining 25 minutes. Without hesitation, he stepped toward the dungeon's entrance. Senna's eyes lit up with excitement as she agreed enthusiastically. Keita added that he didn't need any compensation. If they wanted to join him and record freely, they could go ahead. Dan's spirit ignited with energy. He proudly declared that they should leave the filming to him. Activating his equipment, he unleashed a formation of recording drones, the albacore swarm. The air buzzed as dozens of small drones took flight, ready to capture every angle. With a dramatic tone, Dan announced the deployment complete and started the music. As the beat reverberated through the dungeon, Keita and Senna dashed forward. The rhythm pulsed through their movements. Keita remarked that he liked the song, asking if it was a new one. Senna confirmed it was and thanked him, her smile bright. Keita felt his energy rising. It was almost as though the music itself was giving him a buff. Their momentum attracted monsters, and soon the path ahead filled with them. Without hesitation, Keita swung his bat. Each strike landed with heavy precision, knocking monsters away with powerful, echoing crashes. The satisfying thud of impact made him grin. Senna laughed, exhilarated. Fighting alongside Keita, she felt she could finally unleash her full strength. Keita reassured her with confidence, and Senna lifted her spear high. A glowing magic circle formed above her head as she chanted Emerald Crush. Massive shards of radiant emerald light rained down, impaling the monsters around them. Keita chuckled inwardly. What a ridiculous scene this was, an old man like him getting carried away, teaming up with a young woman for an impromptu battle dance. Yet, as their eyes met and they moved in sync with the beat, he couldn't help but feel the exhilaration. It was embarrassingly fun. He couldn't bring himself to refuse her energy. In a sudden burst of motion, Keita caught Senna and launched her into the air. Watching her rise, he thought to himself that people who take pride in their work are truly admirable, and he couldn't help but respect that deeply. Midair, Senna extended her arm and invoked Emerald Crush once again. The shards exploded with brilliance, scattering across the chamber. Online, the live chat erupted with excitement. Comments flew by in real time. They cleared the second stage in exactly 13 minutes. Way to go, old man. Wait, didn't CEO Owari take 8 hours with a team of 36? Yeah, but that was just a prank to make the party look bad, lol. Lucky Keita. If I were that strong, I'd quit my job too. This live stream of Senna's new song is amazing. Worth every yen. Donations poured in, 10,000 yen, then another and another. Hikari, still managing the stream, stared in disbelief. The response was instantaneous. It was going viral before her eyes. Back inside the dungeon, Keita and Senna pressed on, entering the Incubus Palace. The air grew heavier, the music swelling as they advanced. When they looked up, they froze. Above them, in the shadowed ceiling of the vast chamber, loomed the demon boss, its claws gripping an entire vehicle as if it were nothing more than a toy. A loud, metallic creaking echoed through the vast chamber. Keita and Senna turned their eyes upward. The demon boss loomed before them, massive and menacing, clutching a battered vehicle in its claws. Yet against all odds, the engine of that vehicle was still running, its wheels spinning in vain as if trying to drive forward. The boss jolted and let out an earth-shaking roar, the sound reverberating through the palace walls. The livestream chat exploded into chaos. Stop spawning such huge bosses out of nowhere. Damn management. Who's running this event? This isn't a video game. That boss is surrounded by a poison swamp. What a garbage stage. There's no way anyone can even get close to that thing. Kata's expression hardened. He turned to Senna and asked if she was ready. She nodded firmly, her spear already in hand. The boss roared again, its claws tightening around the vehicle. The wheels screeched as metal ground against stone, then, crash, a deafening impact shook the room. The comments kept coming. The boss doesn't even care that the ground's collapsing. It's impossible to beat something like that. Nah, they've got that old man. He'll figure it out. Through the settling smoke, the viewers caught sight of Kata. He was already behind the boss, moving silently and precisely. With a sudden swing, his metal bat struck the creature's leg. The impact echoed sharply. The massive boss staggered, crashing to the ground. Did the old man just take it down? Wait, no, it's getting back up. Senna leapt from one floating debris to another, determination blazing in her eyes. She shouted defiantly, her spear bursting with radiant energy as she invoked Gi-Balg. A surge of immense power flared from the weapon, striking the boss square in the head. The monster bellowed in agony and, in retaliation, unleashed a torrent of fire. The screen erupted in blinding red. Viewers flooded the chat in panic. Did the flames hit him? Is Kato okay? Why are you people cheering for the monster? Wait, is the old man's outfit just normal clothes? No dungeon gear. But then, out of the flames, came the sound of a single step. A blackened shoe pressed against the ground. Kata emerged, unharmed, his metal bat dragging behind him. His calm voice resonated through the static, deep and steady. Even intangible things have a core. The comments exploded again. Oh my god, his voice is so sexy, even with the filter. I'm a dude, but why is it suddenly hot in here? Hey mister, you're so cool. 20,000 yen super chat. Hikari nearly fell from her chair, stunned at how wildly passionate the fans had become. The chat continued to surge. Wait, are the flames being absorbed? Kata's eyes narrowed as he dragged the bat through the ash. If you can find that core, he murmured, you can knock anything out of the park. Raising his bat, he called out his skill, bad ball hitter. The captured smoke condensed into a glowing ball. He swung, and the ball of compressed power soared toward the boss, expanding as it flew. At the same moment, the vehicle's engine roared back to life, rolling forward on its own. Kata smashed its wheels with perfect timing, redirecting it toward the boss's chest. Senna, already airborne, caught the rhythm. The boss turned, eyes widening, but it was too late. The vehicle collided with the core of the creature's chest just as the power sphere struck. The explosion that followed shook the entire palace. Blinding light, a roar, then silence. When the smoke cleared, jewels and coins rained from above, glittering in the dim dungeon light. The demon boss was gone, defeated. Dan's voice broke through the haze. Bravo, he shouted, nearly ecstatic. That was incredible. You two are the best. Kata exhaled and adjusted his glasses. Senna approached him, eyes gleaming, and asked for his name. He replied that he should have introduced himself earlier, and that she could just call him K. Senna tilted her head. K? That's cute. Is it K for kitty? She teased. Kata corrected her. It was K as in the Chinese character for firefly. They shine brightly, he said, and then fade away. Senna frowned gently. She didn't like the symbolism, even as a joke, but she smiled afterward. Firefly, huh? She murmured, her voice soft and sincere. She met his gaze and thanked him deeply. It was a performance I'll never forget. Kata smiled faintly in return. Nearby, Hikari's familiar spirit drone purred to life again, its lens capturing the final scene. The live chat erupted once more. The quality of this footage is insane. Please remove the mosaic from Kata's face already. Senna looks so smitten with him. My brain hurts. 30,000 yen. Giving money while losing brain cells. Senna's fans are nuts. Wait, this is basically the making of Senna's new music video, right? Thank you for showing us something this good. 10,000 yen. Hikari stared at the stream numbers in disbelief. Subscriber count, over 140,000. Super chats, still climbing. Senna's influence was unbelievable. She clasped her hands in excitement, whispering with a giddy smile, Uncle and Senna, thank you so much. Inside the Shinjuku Kabukicho dungeon, at the respawn point, it was late at night, and there were few adventurers around. Dan felt a strange sense of melancholy, as the atmosphere reminded him of the third-generation Fountain Square in Yamita. Kato was surprised to learn that Dan was from Kansai. After finishing their task, Keita thanked Dan and Senna for helping him collect the trash. When Dan received the garbage bag labeled Tokyo 23 wards, he commented that he had never heard anyone refer to picking up item drops as trash collection before. Senna questioned if Keita was really fine with splitting the loot evenly, since he had done most of the work, but Keita insisted it was fine and took his leave. As Keita walked away, Dan observed that Keita didn't seem greedy, or perhaps he was just unusual. Senna couldn't even imagine how much the total value of their finds might be. The laws concerning dungeons were still incomplete. There was no clear legal ownership over lands where dimensions were distorted, and neither monsters nor treasures technically belonged to anyone. In these gray areas, adventurers could claim what they picked up as their own property, but there was no telling when or how the law might change. Even selling dropped items would bring only around 1,000,000 yen at most, hardly enough to live on. To convert those items into cash legally, Keita would have to register as an adventurer, but that would violate his company's policy against moonlighting. He once tried to sell something on an auction site, but the listing was reported as a scam, and his account was banned. Later, when paying a late fee, the man at the counter said he was only 10 minutes late, but Keita insisted on paying anyway, earning the man's thanks. To Keita, all of it felt worthless. He took the bag of items to a donation box for dungeon disaster victims. Though it was meant for donations, he thought its large size was convenient. Feeling guilty for using a garbage bag, he consoled himself that at least it would cover the disposal fee and mentally asked for forgiveness. He didn't realize that 2 women had witnessed him. Nearby, Hikari, who was hidden in stealth mode, saw everything. She couldn't understand what Keita was thinking. Donating all those dropped items was such a waste. She even considered taking them back secretly. The 2 women who had also seen him were indignant. One remarked that the old man had just thrown trash into the donation box, and the other called him rude and lacking common sense. Furious, they decided to report him to the organization in charge, agreeing that he should be arrested. One of them made a call, reporting that someone had discarded trash in the donation box in front of Shinjuku Station using a city-designated garbage bag. She was shocked when the person on the line said they would come immediately. Soon, an older officer arrived, panting. He confirmed that the 2 women had witnessed a man dumping the bag. They told him the culprit had headed toward the station and urged him to hurry before the litterer got away. The officer's reaction surprised them. He said they weren't looking to catch the man, but to thank him. The women were confused as the officer unlocked the donation box. Inside, the garbage bag was full of glittering, valuable items. The officer was amazed, explaining that tonight's donation was especially generous and that they were deeply grateful to the man. He explained that the donor had been doing this since the dungeon disaster 18 years ago, likely an adventurer who had experienced it firsthand, making large anonymous donations ever since. The woman in black clothes was astonished, noting that the man had looked like an ordinary old man. The officer said they called him Daddy Garbage Bag, after the benefactor Daddy Long Legs, since sightings always described an older man. Hikari thought the nickname was ridiculous, while the woman with shorter hair admitted she had no idea the man they'd judged so harshly was actually such an incredible person. The woman in black realized how rude they had been. Hikari, still hidden, told herself that her uncle was truly amazing. The next morning, Keita appeared gloomy. Akari Yamahara, his older sister by 2 years and Hikari's mother, noticed how tired he looked and asked if he hadn't slept well. Keita admitted that he had some unexpected trouble but was glad to have the next 2 days off. When Akari asked what had happened, he explained that it was complicated. During a business visit, someone had lost their temper with him, and afterward, on his way to meet Hikari, he was nearly accused of being a groper. Akari was surprised to hear that he had plans to meet Hikari, since she hadn't been told about it. At that moment, Hikari appeared cheerfully, bringing coffee and asking her mother if she had everything she ordered. Akari reminded her that if she wanted to play the role of a waiter, she could at least do it quietly, then questioned why she had been meeting with Keita. Hikari explained that she thought it would be nice to have a pleasant meal with her uncle once in a while. Akari, who hated missing out on things, asked why she hadn't been invited too. Keita mentioned that he thought it had been Akari's idea, which surprised her. Hikari realized she had been caught. When Akari pressed further, Hikari explained that her mother was always busy with work, and she had simply wanted to show her appreciation to her uncle for working so hard every day. With teary eyes, she asked if that was such a bad thing. Her innocent expression made it impossible for either of them to scold her. Akari said lying was wrong, but if Hikari told her next time, she would definitely join them, so she should invite her as well. Keita smiled and said he appreciated Hikari's kind thoughts, but that she didn't need to worry about him. He was doing fine. Hikari apologized, relieved that the situation had been defused. Her thoughts then returned to the false accusation Keita had mentioned. When he told them the details, Hikari was furious. She couldn't believe anyone would think he was capable of something like that. The very idea seemed absurd to her. She growled in frustration, unable to forgive whoever had made such a false claim. Keita tried to calm her down, but she continued to fume inwardly, thinking how ridiculous it was. Her uncle had been quietly donating money for 18 years. Someone like that would never do something so awful. The accusation was pure nonsense. Keita reassured her that there was no need to worry and that he had already exchanged contact information with the woman involved. Akari, however, exclaimed that wasn't enough. She warned that Keita never knew when or where that weirdo might cause more trouble. Hikari agreed, insisting that he should fight back if needed. Keita declined but felt a deep warmth inside. Family, he thought, was a wonderful thing. They believed in you completely, without needing any proof. Meanwhile, Hikari took out her phone and searched for the Groper streamer video. She sent a message to Mia, explaining that her uncle was in trouble and asking her to check the video on the pervert repellent Mamercan channel. Mia replied that she was looking into it. Determined to protect her uncle, Hikari focused on her phone until Akari scolded her for using it during their meal. Hikari was determined to protect her uncle. She messaged Mia, promising that she would do anything in return if Mia helped her. Mia's teasing reply made Hikari nervous about what kind of favor she might demand later. As Hikari continued to check her phone, Akari told her to stop looking at it during their meal. Hikari apologized, claiming she just couldn't resist checking social media. Keita chuckled, saying it was nice to be young. He admitted that he didn't really understand social media and envied her for being so familiar with it. While eating, Hikari commented that Keita would probably be popular if he tried it. He was fun and interesting. Keita replied that he didn't have anything worth showing online. Then, his phone suddenly buzzed, and he excused himself to answer it. He asked if something urgent had happened. The person on the other end explained that it wasn't about the groping incident, but another matter entirely. They had already summoned Ukai, who was handling that issue. When Keita asked what it was about, his boss informed him that Kachidoki from Doom Production had requested to meet. Kachidoki wanted to apologize for his previous behavior and make amends. Keita found the idea unpleasant and said he'd rather not go, unsure of what Kachidoki was planning. His boss replied that she had thought about leaving it to the company's lawyer, but the CEO had personally ordered Keita to attend. The CEO had said Keita must go, kneel down, and beg to secure the deal. Keita questioned whether that was power harassment. His boss half-jokingly agreed that it probably was, but asked him not to say it out loud. Keita clarified that he didn't have the right to refuse, and his boss confirmed it. If he refused, she would be fired too, though she added that their company might collapse before that happened anyway. Frustrated, Keita sighed. His boss told him the meeting was scheduled for Monday, 2 days later, and that she would email him the details. When the call ended, Hikari immediately asked if everything was all right. Before Keita could answer, his phone buzzed again. He groaned in irritation. Hikari teased that he seemed quite popular this morning. Keita replied that popularity at work only made him feel depressed. Seeing the caller ID, he excused himself once more. Hikari wanted to follow him, but Hikari stopped her, telling her to finish her breakfast. She reassured Hikari that Keita was an adult who could handle himself and that she should trust him. Hikari was surprised her mother didn't scold her further. She sat down again, fidgeting with curiosity, wondering who Keita was speaking to. Keita, outside, answered the new call. He addressed the caller, Shiratama, asking what this was about. On the other end, in a cozy setting with a burger on the table, was the adventurer Swearin, real name Swearin Shiratama. She apologized for the trouble caused by someone from her company. Keita was surprised that she already knew about the incident. Swearin explained that rumors were spreading in the office about a confrontation between a salesperson from Adventurer Book Company and someone called Doki. Keita then realized that Doki must have been Kachidoki's nickname from his adventurer days. Swearin warned him that Doki was a dangerous person and advised him to be careful. Sitting beside her were Rindo and Amazuru, both eating quietly as they listened. When Keita asked what she meant by dangerous, Swearin explained that Doki liked to start relationships by getting off on the wrong foot, claiming that he bonded with people by fighting them one-on-one. She told Keita to think of Doki as a caveman. Keita found the idea absurd. How could someone still act like that in this day and age? Swearin sighed and said that whenever things didn't go Doki's way, he had a habit of summoning the people he disliked into the dungeon. Keita wondered how Doki managed to avoid being fired and questioned what was going on with Doom Productions' compliance system. Swearin explained that Doki had powerful connections with someone high up in the company. Amazuru added that, according to office rumors, those connections meant Doki possessed compromising information about someone in authority, which allowed him to get away with anything. Keita immediately understood how Doki had managed to maintain his position despite his behavior. Swearin went on to say that Doki supposedly had a streamer working under him who performed citizens' arrests and helped cover up any incidents before they could cause trouble. Hearing this, Keita recalled that on the same night he clashed with Doki, he had been falsely accused of groping someone. Swearin apologized and said she was certain that had been Doki's doing. Keita finally realized why Doki had summoned him. Swearin asked if he was all right and offered to speak to her higher-ups about it. She even suggested the possibility of collaborating on a project together. Keita thanked her but refused, saying he couldn't let her go through the trouble. It might even put her in danger. Swearin mumbled that it wasn't fair. He had already collaborated with Senna. Keita, however, wasn't paying attention. In his mind, he was already planning his next move. If his company collapsed now, he would be in serious trouble. He couldn't even think about changing jobs. He had forgotten how to write a resume. Keita told Swearin that Kachidoki had summoned him for Monday and that he was probably going to be dragged into a dungeon. Swearin was about to offer her help, but Keita mentioned that he worked in sales, which caught her off guard. He explained that sales was basically about connecting old men with other old men, selfish ones, cowardly ones, trashy ones, and occasionally, a few kind ones. Most of the time, they just made reasonable demands of each other, yet despite their age, none of them were truly adults. Swearin remarked that Keita sounded intimidating. Keita clarified that what he meant was that salespeople were nothing but scum. Even so, he added, scum still had to do their jobs, or the world wouldn't function. Swearin questioned if that could really be called a job, being summoned by gangster-looking men and beaten up. Keita replied that it was fine as long as it happened during working hours, and there was no need for her to worry. Swearin protested that, regardless of what he said, she still wanted to recommend him for projects. Keita asked her not to mention his name. If he got credit for her efforts and ended up being promoted, it would only lead to a meaningless management role with more work and less pay. He sighed at the thought, lamenting the darkness of modern society. After a brief silence, Keita asked Swearin if she knew Senna. Swearin replied that she did. They didn't interact much outside of work, but she would love to spend time with her. Keita said that was perfect. He had met Senna the previous night and received one of her staff's business cards, so he planned to ask Dan to contact her on his behalf. Swearin assumed he meant Dan, and she asked what Keita was planning. Keita said that since Monday was coming soon, he intended to deal with everything the old-fashioned way and get it over with. On Monday at Shinjuku Station, Keita arrived and quietly assessed his surroundings. Ahead of him stood a man carrying a guitar case, likely concealing a sword, and another who probably had a hidden weapon, perhaps a hammer. He glanced at his watch. It was exactly 7 o'clock. He had spent the morning and afternoon working as usual, though his boss and Ukai were clearly worried about him. He appreciated their concern. The two men in front of him were clearly there to block his escape if he tried to run. Keita continued walking calmly. That meant the real threat was probably behind him. As if on cue, someone behind him shouted, calling him a pervert. A man pressed a knife against his side. Keita realized they were actually kidnapping him in public, without subtlety. Playing along, he began to screech in mock panic. The man behind him ordered him to shut up and move. They started walking together toward another location, Keita still acting frightened. A surveillance camera nearby activated, recording the scene. The man urged Keita to walk faster, shoving him. Keita cried out, pretending to be hurt, begging the man not to hit him. Everything was proceeding exactly as Keita had planned. They continued walking into a dark alley. Keita wondered if it was a secret gate unknown to the guild. If that were true, no one would ever find out what happens to anyone who enters. This must have been their usual route. These men truly intended to kill him. They arrived at the Shinjuku dungeon, in the zone between levels 15 and 20. Their footsteps echoed through a long hallway until they stopped before a door. Inside, a man sat waiting for him. He claimed to have been expecting Keita and promised to grant him the collaboration he wanted through a one-on-one showdown. The man introduced himself as Doki Kinya. Mamoru, standing behind Keita, grabbed his collar in defense of Doki's pride. He boasted about his past fame, saying he had once gained 127,000 followers as a live streamer, a feat he considered a big deal. Keita, however, knew the truth. Those followers were bought, and Mamoru's career had ended in disgrace after his team exposed him for exploiting others and scamming players by selling dropped items under false pretenses. Mamoru's pride shattered under Keita's words. Enraged, he punched Keita in the face, but the hit was weak. Keita deliberately tumbled to the ground, groaning as if in pain, playing the helpless victim. Internally, he calculated that this would be enough to draw out Doki's confession. If he could get the man to speak his motives, it would be solid evidence. Doki's disgust grew as he stared at Keita's feigned weakness. He saw in Keita's calm expression something inhuman, a predator hiding behind fragile glasses. He struck Keita again and again until Keita's glasses fell to the ground. Lifting Keita by the collar, Doki called him a monster pretending to be human. Beneath the bruises, Keita's eyes betrayed no fear, only quiet observation. Doki realized this and sneered, challenging him to a one-on-one fight. He drew his flaming sword, its heat filling the room, and declared that if Keita refused, he would kill him. As Doki lunged, water magic SSS, megaton pump. A torrent of water blasted from nowhere, slamming into Doki and extinguishing the flames. Keita muttered to himself, amused by the system's built-in safeguard that prevented friendly fire within party zones. Doki gasped for breath, coughing out water, stunned by the overwhelming magic. At that moment, several figures appeared. Amazuru announced that everything, the kidnapping, the assault, the attempted murder, had all been recorded. Rin stepped forward, confirming the gravity of the crime. Then another voice entered the scene. It was Swearin, addressing Doki by his real name, Kinya, expressing disappointment. Doki was shocked to see her and turned toward Keita, realizing this had been a setup all along. Keita calmly adjusted his glasses. He explained that even though dungeons were lawless zones, crimes like this would still have consequences once exposed. No adventurer privilege could shield them from justice. Mamoru, panicking, tried to justify their actions, claiming they were only punishing Keita for being a pervert. He begged Swearin to believe him. Another person interrupted, calling out Mamoru's lies. Mamoru recognized her vaguely from a train encounter days before and demanded to know what she was doing there. The girl transformed before their eyes. It was Senna Maizono, the spear dancer who had been publicly known as a victim of harassment. Doki froze in disbelief, turning his fury on Mamoru for targeting her. Mamoru protested that he had no idea the plain-looking girl was actually Senna and cursed his misfortune. Senna explained that she preferred to keep her private life hidden. Keita, adjusting his glasses again, reflected that he too had been shocked upon learning her identity. The coincidence had been almost too convenient. Still, it had allowed their plan to proceed perfectly. He mused that while adventurers could alter their appearance through avatars, the transformation usually wasn't drastic enough to hide their essence completely. Senna caught him staring and accused him of thinking something rude. He denied it smoothly and shifted the focus back to the matter at hand. Strength surged through him as he activated his buffs, his presence changing in an instant. The onlookers gasped as his physique expanded beneath the sharp lines of his suit. Doki and his men realized, too late, who stood before them. The man they had cornered was none other than Shinjuku Batter. Keita exhaled deeply, admitting that holding in his stomach for so long was exhausting, especially for someone his age. Senna could hardly believe that was his concern at a time like this. She remarked that Keita seemed more like a con artist than she did, and when she asked the others, Rin and Swearin readily agreed. Keita clenched his fist and turned his attention to Doki. Doki denied his earlier challenge, insisting he never said anything about a one-on-one match and claiming Keita was no better than he was. If he had known Keita's true identity, he never would have done this. Keita calmly reminded him that fighting one-on-one was Doki's idea of forming friendship, which Doki quickly denied again. However, all the women confirmed that they had heard him say it. Swearin asked where Keita's bat was. Keita replied that he didn't have it and didn't need it. His hands alone were enough. A white-haired man sneered, accusing Keita of acting cocky in front of women. He told Keita to stop showing off and announced that he would handle the fight himself. Mocking Keita, he asked if Keita really thought he could win without gear. He drew his sword and told Kinya he would take care of everything. The white-haired man charged, activating his skill, Lightning Sword B, and its sub-skill, Mowdown. But before his attack could land, Keita's fist connected squarely with his face. The blow sent him reeling. Keita told him to stop wasting time talking and start fighting properly. Mamoru was stunned into silence. Rin muttered that the scene was brutal. Swearin, wide-eyed, asked if that was karate and turned to Rin for confirmation. Rin shook her head, explaining that what Keita did was far beyond ordinary karate. It was on an entirely different level. Keita pointed at the next opponent. The man smirked, commenting that Keita's strengths seemed to be speed and power. He pulled out a bottle, which Keita immediately analyzed. The weapon appeared to be a disguised club, a wine bottle infused with water and cold air elements, designed to be effective against durable opponents. The man declared that Keita's power and speed would be useless once he was frozen. But before he could act, Keita's fist smashed into his face. The bottle slipped from his grasp and shattered. Keita muttered that he was too slow and reminded them all that he had told them to attack together. Mamoru screamed in horror as the man's face collapsed under the impact. Panicking, he begged for mercy, claiming he was only provoked by Doki. Keita replied that Mamoru no longer had the will to fight and told the others to restrain him. Rin sighed, irritated by the entire situation. Doki, trembling, muttered that Keita was insane, some kind of martial arts master. Keita casually explained that he had only dabbled in karate because his sister practiced it, so he was just an amateur. Swearin turned to Rin, reminding her that Rin had ranked 4th in the National High School League, and asked what she thought. Rin admitted that Keita's physical strength was unreal, saying that getting hit by him was like being punched by Superman. It would knock anyone out instantly. Swearin teased her, asking if that meant Keita was the strongest, but Rin just glared at her smug expression. Now it was Doki's turn. Keita asked what he planned to do. Doki charged forward, activating his weapon skill Flambe sword, shouting for Keita to burn to ashes. The girl stayed back, watching. Doki thought it didn't matter if Keita was really the Shinjuku Batter. There was no way he could withstand that attack unarmed. But as the flames neared Keita, they suddenly neutralized. The fire compressed into a glowing sphere cradled between Keita's hands. Everyone froze in disbelief. Keita explained that fire, by nature, was heat, intangible and untouchable. But once it was given a blade-like form, it could be cut and therefore could be blocked. To stop a formless flame, one only needed to find its core. Doki's mind went blank as he realized Keita had caught his fire skill mid-attack. Keita called the technique a circular block. He had read about it in a manga years ago, tried it once, and discovered that it worked surprisingly well. It could even deflect arrows, bullets, and flamethrowers. Panic overtook Doki. None of it made sense to him. This level of control was beyond his understanding. Keita then mumbled something about drawing a line. The others looked puzzled, unaware that he was recalling a lesson, imagining the line where he wanted the power to travel. He hurled the sphere forward, chanting, "Challenge course advanced level, 110 miles per hour fastball." The sphere rocketed toward Doki, striking him directly. The explosion of power sent Doki flying, blood spraying from his mouth as he collapsed to the ground. Keita looked down at him, expression calm. The women stood speechless. Then Keita smiled faintly and told them it was time to head to the place where Doki would respawn. At the respawn point, Doki reappeared, disoriented, thumb in his mouth, mumbling for his mother. Keita noted with relief that Doki was alive. Adventurers revived at respawn points whenever they died within a dungeon, their avatars, bodies woven from mana, acting as vessels that absorbed all damage in their place. Death inside a dungeon was never true death. Only the soul experienced the momentary collapse, while the body remained unharmed. Doki, however, sat trembling, calling for his mother again. Keita remarked that he seemed all right. Senna stared at him, uncertain. Doki looked like an infant, both in expression and in mind. Keita explained that he was simply in shock from the revival process, a temporary side effect that would fade in a few days. He admitted that senseless violence left him unsatisfied. It broke his spirit. Senna, however, pointed out that he seemed to be enjoying himself more than he claimed. Keita shifted the subject, asking if Doom Production could take care of the captives. The Tide men began to protest, but Keita's mind was already made up. He would have preferred to hand them to the authorities, but if the incident went public, the police would interrogate him thoroughly. The scandal would also drag down innocent employees like Swearin and Senna, who had helped him. He couldn't repay their support with such trouble. Swearin assured him that she had already informed their CEO and that he could leave the men in their hands. Senna added that the company would request proper care for past victims and ensure punishment for the streamers who enabled these crimes. Keita turned to Mamuro and ordered him to delete the video that falsely accused him of groping someone. He also told him to apologize and compensate every victim of his false accusations. Mamuro, trembling, agreed. But when he checked his streaming channel, his face went pale. It had been permanently banned. His career was over. Keita commented that while Mamuro deserved it, the timing was abrupt. Senna wondered aloud if other victims had reported him to the guild. Still, she noted that getting banned was an unusually severe punishment. Swearin agreed, saying that such action required undeniable proof and a formal complaint. Keita recalled the day he told Hikari about the false accusation. She had been furious, fiddling with her phone afterward. But the thought that she might have done something about it seemed absurd. She was just a kid. After everything was settled, Swearin led the group outside toward the dungeon's exit. Rin stretched and groaned that she was starving and suggested they grab something to eat. Amazuru agreed immediately, and Rin turned to Keita and Senna, inviting them to come along. They could celebrate once the captives were turned over. Senna asked what Keita thought, and he said he'd treat them all for helping him. Swearin thanked him but frowned when he asked to sit separately from the group, saying they could just text if needed. She complained that it defeated the whole point of going out together. Keita replied that he simply hated the idea of being mistaken for a sugar daddy, flashing a smug grin. Swearin snapped back, indignant, but followed the others outside. None of them noticed Hikari nearby. She was on her phone with Mia, whispering that the group was heading to a celebration and asking if she should tag along. Mia told her to go, but demanded that Hikari treat her next time. Hikari eagerly agreed. Mia then asked if she was filming or planning to upload anything that day. Hikari replied no, she knew better. Mia said she was surprised. Hikari was more sensible than she looked. Hikari retorted, offended, and Mia teased that she was a cute girl but the last kind she'd want in her family. Hikari shouted back in protest. Then Mia asked whether Hikari planned to tell her uncle that they were the ones responsible for getting Mamuro's channel banned. Hikari said she wanted to, but she couldn't explain how they had done it. It would sound too much like a crime. She had tracked down Mamuro's address from his social media, broken into his home, and gathered evidence from his laptop. In her mind, it was justified, an act of social justice. Mia, half amused, told her that her reasoning sounded exactly like Mamuro's. Later that evening, at the royal hall, the group sat around a long table. Swearin watched Keita and admitted that he was quite a character. Keita insisted that he was just an ordinary office worker, someone you could find anywhere. Senna disagreed, saying his idea of ordinary was completely warped. Swearin added that normal office workers didn't stream. Keita replied that he didn't either. Swearin froze in surprise. She could have sworn he did. Keita just looked back at her, puzzled. Chapter 21 begins with Swearin questioning whether Keita might be the Shinjuku batter. At that moment, Hikari suddenly appeared and cheerfully remarked on the coincidence as she greeted her uncle. She asked what everyone was talking about, which visibly surprised Sato, who wondered why she was there. Hikari brushed it off as mere chance. When Swearin asked Keita who the girl was, he explained that she was his niece. Hikari then pretended to be surprised upon recognizing Swearin and Senna. Senna responded by saying that Hikari must be mistaking her for someone else. But Hikari pointed out that although the makeup was different, the face was unmistakably the same. She went on to explain that she was also a streamer, calling herself a fellow professional. Holding up her phone, she proudly showed them her channel, which had 1,504 subscribers. In her thoughts, Hikari congratulated herself for using a ninja-like technique of changing the subject and steering the conversation toward a distraction. Keita stood up and walked a short distance away, immediately prompting Hikari to call out to him and ask where he was going. He replied that he was just refilling his drink and told her not to worry about him, adding that young people should enjoy themselves. In his mind, Keita reflected that things never ended well when he interfered in conversations among girls, and that he simply wanted to drink his beer alone in peace. Swearin then turned her attention back to Hikari and asked whether she was the person behind the Shinjuku batter persona. Hikari was visibly startled and quickly denied it, even letting out a small whistle. However, Swearin pointed out that the whistling was so poor that it was not convincing at all. With a sigh, Swearin remarked that it now made sense why Keita knew nothing about it. Senna was shocked to learn that Hikari had been streaming without her uncle's permission. Swearin criticized this behavior, saying it was wrong to sneak around and expose him like that, calling it a betrayal. Senna then questioned whether Hikari had been using Keita for her own benefit. Hikari reacted with surprise and immediately denied using him, insisting it was not like that at all. The girls pressed her, asking how it was any different. At that point, Swearin noticed Keita standing nearby and was startled by his presence. Hikari nervously asked her uncle whether he had been listening. Keita looked at her and asked if she was causing trouble for anyone else. Hikari, taken aback, replied that she was not. Keita calmly said that was fine. He told Hikari that while he did not know exactly what she was planning, she could go ahead and use him if she wanted. The girls were completely shocked by this statement. Swearin immediately asked Keita if he was serious, pointing out that at the very least, he seemed to understand what Hikari was doing. Keita responded that he did not need to pry into every detail, explaining that it was simply because he loved his family. He said he did not care if Hikari betrayed him or lived off his money. If she wanted a house, he would give her one, and he would even provide her with an allowance. As long as his family was happy, he did not mind any of it. Swearin commented on just how doting Keita was as an uncle, and Keita let out a small laugh. Swearin then admitted that she felt foolish for having worked herself up so much on her own. Keita asked whether she had gotten angry on his behalf and told her that he appreciated it. Despite this, Swearin's expression looked troubled. She covered her face and said that Keita sounded unbearably corny. Meanwhile, Senna and the others looked at Keita with admiration, thinking that he was incredibly cool. Finally, Swearin scolded Hikari, asking what she was trembling for, while noting that Keita completely spoiled her. She added that Hikari really needed to say something to him. Hikari expressed how deeply she loved her uncle. Swearin interpreted this as a hint of jealousy, thinking to herself that having a family was truly something precious. Keita then asked Swearin whether she would mind if he asked about her parents. Swearin explained that she lived only with her mother, having lost her father 18 years ago. Hearing that number made Keita pause. 18 years ago, so much had been lost in this world. He remembered how he had been unable to save even a single soul back then. At the very least, he wished that these children could live happily, even if it was in a world ruled by useless old men. The next day, the company's CEO laughed heartily, claiming that everything had worked out thanks to his own sincere approach. He said he could hardly believe that Doom Production had officially requested a collaboration. As he walked alongside Keita, he excitedly talked about how this would fill the magazine's pages, how the company's future was now secure. Keita stopped him and bluntly told him that he was amazing. At that moment, Keita received a call from his manager. She instructed him to write XYZ on the message board at Shinjuku Station. Keita replied that he understood what she was trying to do, but pointed out that there was no such message board. His manager scoffed internally at the CEO's claims of sincerity. This entire situation, she thought, was Doom Production's own fault. Ukai, who was listening, was surprised, having believed that Keita had resolved everything on his own. The manager explained that the resolution had actually been made possible by the scandal involving the Kasadoki and Mamura channels. In exchange for handling the matter discreetly, a collaboration had been proposed. In essence, it was hush money. The Kenya incident never became public, but rumors of other crimes gradually began to surface. In the end, Kenya was expelled from Doom Production. Mamoru and the other accomplices seemed to have disappeared entirely. Keita wondered whether Doom Production had been pulling strings behind the scenes. The thought unsettled him, and he decided he wanted no part in something so frightening. Ukai said that it did not make sense, pointing out that Keita himself had negotiated directly. She insisted that she would inform them that Keita deserved the credit. Keita immediately asked her not to do that. Ukai protested that all of his hard work would be wasted, but Keita replied that he was fine with it and told her to let them misunderstand. Ukai let out a sigh. Keita smiled and said that he did not need their half-hearted praise anyway. Ukai thought to herself that this was classic Keita, and that was exactly what she loved about him. With the situation settled, the magazine should be safe for a while, and Keita felt that he could finally relax. Just then, his manager called him again and told him to come over. They discussed the Doom project, and Keita was surprised when he learned that Ukai would not be in charge of it. His manager explained that instead, Keita himself would be taking responsibility, as it was a direct order from the CEO. Keita could only think that this meant even more work awaiting him. Keita suddenly sat up in bed, clutching his head. Outside the house, 3 men were gathered. One of them confirmed that this was the house assigned for their mission. Another remarked that the place looked shabby and unlikely to contain anything of value. The man wearing a black helmet dismissed that concern, saying that what they were after was far more valuable than gold. As they monitored information on a phone screen and looked at Akari, the man in the black cap reacted with surprise, noting that despite being over 40, she still had an impressive figure and did not look bad for a woman past her prime. The man in the black mask questioned whether that was really Blackcap's target, remarking that Akari's daughter looked far more appealing. Blackcap responded that risking their lives by entering dungeons was foolish. Targeting unawakened ordinary people carried no risk at all, and they could gain both money and women that way. Another of them agreed, adding that if they kidnapped a girl and forced her to kill a goblin inside a dungeon, she would awaken as a dungeon adventurer. From then on, whether they abused her or killed her, she would always respawn, and there would be nothing illegal about it. Black Helmet concluded that it would be idiotic not to exploit such a system, since there was no way for them to lose. If modern heroes like dungeon streamers represented the light of a new age of adventure, then what they were about to do embodied its pure darkness. An incident born from adventurers misusing their powers for their own selfish desires was on the verge of unfolding. After crossing the gate and landing on the ground, one of them mentioned that a man lived in the house, but that he was just a skinny old guy and should pose no problem. Blackcap assumed that an old man like that must be hoarding cash. Black Helmet added that they would torture him until he revealed his passwords and then steal all his savings. They stopped in front of the house. Black Helmet placed his hand on the door and activated his thief skill to pick the lock. The door creaked, but when they tried to push it open, it did not budge. Silence followed. Blackcap grew irritated and questioned why it was taking so long to unlock such a simple door. Black Helmet hesitated, sensing something wrong, and wondered whether magic or a barrier was involved. A voice suddenly addressed them from above, asking whether there were only 3 of them. Keita stood on the balcony, looking down at them. The intruders immediately recognized him as the old man they had been instructed to beat senseless. The man in the black mask decided they would take him down first and deal with the women afterward. Keita gripped an iron handle and questioned what had just been said. The 3 intruders shuddered. Blackcap questioned whether their commander had not said the old man was just an ordinary person. Black Helmet, shaken, acknowledged that he had, but now felt something was terribly wrong. The aura surrounding Keita felt like that of a monstrous being from a dungeon. They trembled as a sharp swishing sound cut through the air. In an instant, Keita was standing right in front of them. The man in the black mask was stunned, unable to perceive the incoming strike. Keita unleashed a palm strike skill, slamming him down with a heavy thud. Noting the resistance, Keita realized the man was wearing a safety vest made of steel plates, and reflected that his strike had been aimed directly at the heart. Adventurers were resilient, so Black Mask would not die, but there was no doubt that he was suffering badly. At this point, he would surely call the police, so it would be best if the intruders simply allowed themselves to be arrested quietly. Keita asked them what they thought they were doing. Blackcap suddenly charged at him, clearly intending to kill him, but Keita calmly kicked his leg. The bone snapped instantly. Keita remarked on how fragile Blackcap was, even wondering if he might be lacking calcium. Black Helmet then opened a flashing device and labeled Keita a monster. The burst of light temporarily blinded Keita. Taking advantage of that moment, Black Helmet dashed away, declaring that he was getting out of there. Keita tightened his grip on the bat and swung it. The helmet connected squarely with Black Helmet's back, producing a dull thud. Keita wondered whether he was still alive, adding that he had deliberately tried to strike as lightly as possible. Black Helmet trembled and stammered to himself, questioning whether Keita was actually an adventurer and cursing their commander for daring to lie to them. Keita corrected that assumption, stating that he was nothing more than a salaryman who had been woken up in the middle of the night despite having work the next day. In Black Helmet's mind, that explanation made no sense at all. What kind of salaryman could overpower someone with a thief skill using nothing more than a cheap bat? Akari rushed out, shouting and assuming it was a raid attack, declaring that she would kill them. Hikari followed, calling out to her uncle and asking if he was all right after hearing such an insane noise. Keita reassured her that he was fine and told them not to shout in the middle of the night. Akari grabbed Black Helmet and demanded to know whether this was the man who had tried to rob them, remarking on the audacity of targeting their home. Keita replied that he believed it was one of those shady side hustles carried out by adventurers. Hikari asked how Keita had even noticed the intruders while he was asleep. Keita explained that it was thanks to the ornament placed at the entrance. The wooden bear displayed there was a rare item obtainable only from a boss monster in the deeper layers of the Shinjuku dungeon. It generated a powerful barrier around the building and alerted the owner to the presence of intruders. Keita then thanked Hikari for suggesting that they put it on display. Hikari replied that it was an extremely rare item and admitted that she had panicked when she saw Keita about to throw it away. She added that there might be other useful items hidden among all the junk piled up in the storage. Keita then questioned Black Helmet about why they had targeted this house and who this so-called commander was. Black Helmet insisted that he did not know who the commander really was. Keita pressed him, asking whether he was still trying to cover for the man. Black Helmet, visibly nervous, insisted that he was telling the truth. He explained that the commander had never revealed his real name or shown his face. All they had been told was that the job would be lucrative. Even so, Keita already had a strong suspicion forming in his mind about who was behind it all. Keita's manager told him that she had already heard about what happened from the police, and that it must have been a nightmare. She asked whether he could write in his daily report that he had been attacked by shady-side hustlers and had to fight them off, which was why he had been late. Keita replied that when it was put into words like that, it sounded like a teenager's delusion, but since it was the truth, he did not know how else to describe it. His manager then asked whether the culprits had been after money, adding that she hoped it had nothing to do with Doki Kinya. Keita said it was possible that it had been retaliation from Doki, though the criminals themselves did not seem to know anything concrete. His manager asked whether he would be all right and whether he needed to move to a different house. Keita answered that the police had said they would patrol his area more closely, and that his sister seemed willing to stay with him for a while. His manager pointed out that even if Akari was a black belt, those men had still been washed-up adventurers, and she was still a woman. Keita responded that he had made it clear to his sister not to kill people outside of any dungeons and to go easy on them. His manager was shocked that he was more worried about restraining his sister than about the attackers. She added that if anything else came up, Keita should feel free to come to her, since this whole situation might be related to work and she wanted to help if she could. Keita thanked her for her kindness and stepped outside. Ukai was standing there and told him that if he was considering moving, her apartment building had self-locking doors and open vacancies. Keita said he appreciated the offer, but his attention was drawn to what she was holding. He asked whether it was a stuffed animal. Ukai asked if he was curious, then explained that it was the latest AI robot and said it was super cute. Keita glanced back at his manager. His manager quickly added that it was not hers and that there was no way she could afford something that expensive. Keita asked how much it cost. She replied that it was 1 million yen plus a monthly subscription of 50,000 yen. But if 2 million yen were paid up front, the monthly fee would be waived. Both Ukai and Keita were stunned by the mention of 2 million yen. Looking at the adorable robot, Keita thought that its price was not cute at all. His manager went on to say that their contract with Doom had apparently been finalized, the additional loan had been approved, and hush money had been paid out. So their CEO had gone on a spending spree using company funds. Keita remarked that if they had that much money, the CEO could at least put it toward the department's budget. Just the other day, he had been talking about being on the verge of bankruptcy, yet now he was spending lavishly. His manager agreed, but said that since he was the CEO, there was nothing she could do about it. She then brought the conversation back to work and asked Keita how the meeting with Doom Production had gone. Keita felt unsettled, then answered that it had gone so well that they were doomed. The person in charge of the project was a highly motivated and capable young man who presented them with a variety of proposals. He suggested a major overhaul of their flagship magazine, shifting its direction to focus on adventure content while leveraging major-name streamers and positioning the publication as official fan merchandise for Doom Production. Keita laid out a stack of documents, explaining that these were the project proposals and sample merchandise. The plan involved launching a new issue, expanding distribution channels, and including bonus merchandise with every monthly release. His manager reacted with visible shock, but Keita continued. The proposal also included serializing comics and light novels modeled after popular streamers, with future plans for both digital and print publication. His manager murmured in protest, as if to stop him, but Keita went on to add that their department would be responsible for handling all of the arrangements. Ukai was astonished, remarking that such a project would undoubtedly generate enormous profits. Then, suddenly, the room fell silent. Confused, Ukai asked what was wrong, but there was still no response. She muttered again, trying to get their attention. Keita continued speaking in a subdued tone, outlining the full scope of what would be required, negotiating with major streamers, entertaining them, and relaying their demands, taking responsibility for tasks normally handled by the sales department, making last-minute wording adjustments just before deadlines, replacing photos whenever requested, regardless of the time or day, handling sales calls to bookstores, arranging factories for merchandise production, coordinating with illustrators and prototype sculptors. Because they were a weekly magazine, all of this work would come at them relentlessly. He finished by asking how they felt about the sales department being expected to manage the entire operation. Ukai froze, then exclaimed that it was impossible. Keita's manager bluntly told him not to expect to be able to go home on time for the foreseeable future. Keita thought to himself that this likely meant 1 week, or maybe 2. Nearby, the AI robot emitted a small squeak and began to spin. 2 weeks later, time continued to tick by, and Keita was still in the office. He realized he had not been home in 3 days and felt as though he were dying. At that moment, his phone vibrated. It was Hikari calling. She checked on him, asking whether he was all right and whether he was even still alive. Keita replied that he was barely hanging on, but thought he might actually make it home that day. Hikari commented that he sounded lifeless, like a zombie, and asked again if he was truly okay, noting how stressed he must be. Keita admitted that their workload had increased tenfold while staffing remained the same, and that there was honestly no time to sleep. Hikari worried that he was going to ruin his health and urged him to take a break. Glancing at his boss, Keita thought that was not an option. He then asked how things were on her end. Hikari said that police officers had been coming by every day, and that adventurers from a vigilante group also seemed to be patrolling the area. Keita remarked that since 2 weeks had passed, the alert level would probably be lifted soon, but told her to continue being careful on her way to and from school. Hikari acknowledged this, adding that she was happy to be cared for so much. Keita then asked whether she had seen the place he had sent her through the app. Hikari reacted strongly, interpreting it as a suggestion that she move. She immediately rejected the idea, saying she did not want to be separated from her uncle. Keita explained that since their home had been exposed, there were serious safety concerns. Hikari, however, firmly refused the idea, declaring that she would never leave him alone and that this was non-negotiable. Keita accepted her decision. In his heart, he was deeply moved by his niece's feelings. At the same time, he realized that as long as this grueling workload continued, he could not even relocate in order to protect his family. It felt as though invisible chains were binding him. Hikari asked again whether he would be able to come home that night and told him to keep his GPS on. Keita agreed, but said that he wanted to stop by somewhere first to clear his head, so he would probably be late. Hikari accepted that and told him she would have the bath and dinner ready whenever he returned. Keita thanked her, saying that it really helped. Meanwhile, on Hikari's screen, she was looking at an unreleased Shinjuku batter scene. It showed 59,000 views, uploaded 5 days earlier. The comments section was noisy and full of speculation. Some people were asking whether there was still no update. Others wondered if the old man had died, or whether Shinjuku batter was really dead. Another comment brought up the fact that adventurers respawn at revival points. Someone else claimed that Shinjuku must have died outside a dungeon. Another replied that it must have been death from overwork and offered sarcastic condolences. The last comment said that he had gone missing and now he was dead. Hikari reflected that she understood how hard Keita had been working, but now people were starting to speculate that Shinjuku batter had vanished, relying on clipped old videos to get by had its limits. Somewhere else, a man was watching the same video. He muttered to himself, wondering if Shinjuku batter was really dead, urging him to come out already so he could prove that he himself was the strongest. One of Doom Productions' top 3 flagship groups was Blueberry Paladin, also known as Blue Para. They were a hugely popular streamer unit made up of 3 adventurers from Doom Production: Kajaniko, Soma, and Kurenai. Originally, Soma and Kurenai had only been a duo, but after Kajaniko joined them, their popularity skyrocketed. The relaunch issue of Adventure Stance that came bundled with a Blue Para figurine quickly became a major topic of discussion. Keita clicked his mouse and noted that the minimum order quantity had been set at 12,000 copies, yet the online pre-orders had sold out instantly. His manager thought about how enormous the difference was compared to Very Good. She acknowledged that the drawing power of major streamers was on an entirely different level. Keita added that most of the copies were being hoarded by resellers, and that social media was overflowing with cries of despair. They were being flooded with fan complaints. His manager replied that she had suspected as much. Ukai added that on top of that, the figurine was randomized among 3 different types, which had triggered a resale frenzy. Keita's manager said they had to do something about this. All of their hard work only to become fuel for resellers was absurd. Keita then asked Ukai how things were going in the editorial department. Ukai nearly screamed that she felt completely hopeless and utterly doomed. Kajaniko was fiercely opposed to the idea of a photo shoot for the opening spread. She was close to tears, explaining that their schedule was already packed to the limit and she did not know what to do. Keita's manager asked if Kajaniko was really that against it. Ukai confirmed that she was, saying Kajaniko had thrown a huge fit because she found it embarrassing. The concept involved cross-dressing cosplay. Keita's manager commented that it was a bold idea and admitted that she would have liked to see it. Ukai exclaimed in agreement. Keita's manager said it was a classic concept, but it was only natural for someone to feel resistance toward it. Ukai replied that she also thought it was a good pitch, and Doom Production had given it the green light, but maybe they should play it safe and switch to casual outfits or uniforms instead. Keita's manager said it was a shame, but there was nothing they could do about it. Keita reflected that everyone had their own preferences, and even if his manager happened to be into cross-dressing boys, Sato at least had the decency to keep quiet about such things. Keita's manager then asked whether the resale issue could be solved by increasing the production volume. Keita said that it probably could, or they might switch to made-to-order production, at least for the figurines. His manager closed her eyes and agreed. She said she would go negotiate the budget with the boss. They would obviously have to double the staff if they were going to increase production. Otherwise, they would die of overwork. She told Keita to come with her. They went to the CEO's office, where the answer they received was a flat refusal. Hiring more people would only cut into profits. The CEO asked whether they understood. Keita's manager was shocked. The CEO continued, saying they already had enough staff, didn't they? And perhaps they just were not trying hard enough. Keita's manager shot back that there was no way that was true, that they were barely keeping things running by sacrificing their days off and working overtime every single day. The CEO said that he was confident they could pull through. After all, he reasoned, they were still energetic enough to come all the way there and complain in person. Keita stood there in silence. In his mind, the current CEO was nothing like their former one. He remembered how, after apologizing for being absent for so long, the former CEO had told him not to worry about it. After being dragged into that dungeon disaster, the man had simply been glad that Keita made it back alive. The former CEO had even said that he was grateful to him. During Keita's absence, the former CEO had continued paying his salary and had even given him a get-well bonus. Keita had stayed with this company because of what that man had said and done back then. But the person standing in front of him now was completely different. The current CEO added that having work was a privilege and that it was only natural for employees to devote themselves to their company as if it were their #1 priority. Keita felt the urge to beat the man senseless. His manager quickly gestured for him not to act, seeing how furious he was. Keita forced himself to respond calmly, acknowledging her, while clenching his hands tightly behind his back. His manager then told the CEO that as things stood, they were nowhere near meeting Doom production standards. If that continued, Doom might terminate the contract and even withdraw their funding. The CEO reacted angrily, exclaiming that she was being ridiculous and accusing her of threatening him. She replied that she was simply asking for his management expertise. The CEO looked away, and the two of them excused themselves. As they walked down the hallway, Keita's manager told him not to kill the CEO yet, joking that they would murder him socially instead. Keita apologized. She explained that she had recorded the conversation just in case, although it was not exactly solid evidence since it was a hidden recording. Keita remarked that it was proof of stupidity rather than a crime. His manager replied that it was still enough to report him to the Labor Standards Office. The CEO was definitely guilty of something. Keita added that they would also check with accounting, as he was sure the man was guilty there as well. Keita used the vending machine and handed his manager a mixed coffee. She thanked him and said she would pay him back later. Keita told her not to worry about it, as it was his treat. She commented that he really knew her tastes well. Keita reasoned that since their desks were close to each other, he had picked up on it. He then thought to himself that his manager was also a victim in all of this, and that the company might truly be in serious trouble. Later, Ukai wished Keita a good evening. Keita returned the sentiment and told her he would see her tomorrow. In his thoughts, he realized how starving he was. He wanted to sleep in his own bed. As he walked away, he imagined taking a bath. But not yet. He could not sleep like this. The stress he had bottled up needed to be released. Afterward, he headed to the deeper layers of the Shinjuku dungeon, to the border area of the 140th level. As he walked in, he murmured to himself that this was it, that he had missed this, and that he had finally made it back after so long. Then he heard footsteps. An armored soldier appeared. With a loud roar, it attacked from behind. Keita reacted instantly, punching it and remarking that it was too slow. Its ribs cracked, and the armored soldier coughed up blood. The soldier cursed as it reeled from the blow. Keita swept his gaze around the area. He then addressed the people hiding nearby, stating that he could see them.